What is happening out there, rotoscouts baseball fans? Welcome to a Thursday show, gang. Week is flying by already. Through the midway point. NBA draft last night. Anybody watch? It's kind of a really weak draft. I gotta say, I'm sure a few good players will end up coming out of it, but man, what an underwhelming draft. We were comparing it to the 2013 draft, the Anthony Bennett one. Like, Giannis was in that draft, but he went 15 or something like that as a project. CJ McCollum went 10. And then the best player that I think out of the top 9 guys, I think was probably Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, KCP. Otto Porter went 3, I think, in that draft. So, arguably he was better. But such a weak draft. I think Alex Len was 2. And last night felt like that kind of a draft. Knicks ended up taking a project so they could stash him and not have it count against the salary cap, and then they made a few moves to get a little bit of savings so that they can hopefully bring back Hartenstein, complete the infinity gauntlet of role players that they're putting together. Love what they're doing with the team. Hopefully your teams out there got the players that you wanted on them. Who was the best player in that draft, do you guys think? Seemed like everybody was universally praising the guy that fell to the Lakers as a pretty solid bargain. As discussed, I don't have the bandwidth for college sports, so there's a lot of these guys that I don't find out about until they're already drafted, and then I look at them for next year. But it seemed like a lot of people like that kid. To me, it just seems like a weird fit a little bit. You obviously take the talent there and worry about it later. But it seems redundant with a few guys they already have as far as his skill set. But what do I know? Anyway, we're here to talk baseball. Early start today. We've got a very early start on FanDuel. It's a 6:20 start on FanDuel, and it includes the first 2 games, the Miami-Philly game and the Rangers and Orioles game, which adds 2 really good games to the slate. So it makes sense to go 6 games on FanDuel. DK did not do that. They're going with a 4-gamer. Starting at 7:07. They've got a separate 2-gamer starting at 6:20. I don't have the pricing loaded into the model here for that slate, but what I do have is all of the DK projections for those games are going to be there. So if you're playing that DK 2-gamer, just follow along on the side there with the projections. But tell you what, can I just drop this in real quick? I think I can just drop those prices in without mixing things up too badly. Just remind me as we're talking about it that those games aren't on the main slate, huh? But anyway, hopefully everybody out there is doing well. Looked like we had some winners in the Discord yesterday. I know Lone Wolf hit something, and I think Woody hit looked like $2,000. I don't know if that was a new screenshot from Woody or if he was just using it in an argument that he was having. But congratulations on the win whenever it took place, and everybody else out there who won. Always feel free to drop those into Discord, send them to me on Twitter. Love seeing those pop up. There we go. So we got the pricing, the DK pricing for these first 2 games is going to be for that 2-game early slate. And the projections are just the projections. It's an interesting board. We've got, feels like more high-end pitching to work with, even though it's a shorter slate as compared to yesterday, with a bunch of the garbage that we had to work with yesterday. Let's say hi to everybody. Cujo's here. Hope your day's going well too, buddy. Andy Melman's here. Matthew Patterson dropping by. Happy Thirsty Thursday. Easy for me to say. Yeah, Thursday's always a good happy hour day. I've said it before. Always enjoyed the punch out at 3:30, 4 o'clock. Go for a couple early ones. All of a sudden, a couple early ones turns into, wow, we probably should have gotten dinner by now. It's like 9:30 and I've had 12 beers, 3 scotches and 2 shots. Then you go get food. Then you wander back to the bar. All of a sudden, you've missed the last bus home. You show up to the work in the same clothes the next day. You have an unproductive Friday, and then it's the weekend. That's how happy hour goes. Top of the board, that Marlins-Phillies game, 8 runs in that one. Phillies monster favorites, a 5.19 implied total for them. Under a 3-run total on the other side for the Marlins. They're facing Zach Wheeler, so that one makes sense. Trevor Rogers going for the Marlins. That game has wind out to left field. Or, no, excuse me. It's I'm looking at Roth's report here. It's mostly left to right. So not out to left field, but I guess in a bit from right at 10 miles an hour is his report. I misread that. But we're not really worried about the wind. It looks like a pretty terrific spot for Phillies bats in their home park. And obviously, Zach Wheeler's a monster for that FanDuel slate against the Marlins. And I assume he's just, absurdly expensive on that 2-game DK slate. But would obviously be the top pitcher there. Second game up, the Rangers at the Orioles. Just a 7.5 run total between two pretty decent teams. We've got Corbin Burnes against John Gray in that one. Burnes going for the Orioles against the Rangers. John Gray going back the other way. Just a 4.40 implied total against John Gray. He's a good, solid, slightly above average league pitcher. Maybe a little bit more than that even. So you get him on the right day. No issues with using him against the Orioles here, assuming the prices are right. We'll take a look. But there's also a lot of days where, you give another half a run to that game and the Orioles are popping up into the high fours. So there's some compelling bats on that team, even with the semi-lowish total. And that's not a bad total for the way that it plays on the slate. The Phillies are higher. The Guardians and the Tigers later on are higher. The Royals are a little bit higher and they rank better. Yankees are a little bit higher. But that's in play. The Rangers on the other side going up against Burnes really don't love it for a scuffling Rangers team. Been up and down, but I do like that lineup. Any given slate, it's going to be under-owned. It could be an approach to tackling the slate. I'm sure they're going to be underpriced again in that matchup. DK joins the main slate with the Yankees in the Blue Jays game. Carlos Rodon going for the Yankees against Jose Barrios. Couple of playable pitchers, couple of skippable pitchers, depending on how you want to look at both of those guys. We can absolutely succeed with either of those guys against either of these opponents. They do have the upside. They do both have a ceiling. They do both have strikeout stuff on the right day. Neither one is in a good matchup, and neither one has been reliable in quite some time. On talent, Carlos Rodon is the better option. Jose Barrios, as I've said a number of times already this season and going back over time, to me is just a slightly above league average pitcher. There's not much daylight talent-wise between Jose Barrios and John Gray. And I think Jose Barrios gets, in people's opinion, he gets significantly overrated by comparison. So, tricky spot there, playable. It's going to be a four corners game when we discuss it. There's bats on the Blue Jays that we can get to for cheap. There's bats on the Yankees that you can go to. And you can use either pitcher. Reds and the Cards. This is a really interesting spot to me. The Reds are, it seems, really underrated on this Vegas board. And again, I don't like to do this. I don't like to say, hey, this is a 3.5 run total that should be a 4.5 run total. And I'm not saying that exactly. But the Reds have picked up their offense significantly against right-handed pitching over the last month and a half, 2 months. They are, if you rank for the full season, they're like 10 points below league average for run creation by WRC plus in the split against righties. But if you look since May 15th, they're into the high 90s. If you look to the start of June, so we're talking about a full month of June, they're actually above average. So I think their offense has picked up a little bit. We looked at Ellie the other day against righties and his performance there, and he's terrific. We've looked at him on the other side of splits. He's just obviously a super high-end player. They do have some potential absences from that lineup. There's a couple guys that are banged up in that lineup. Friedel's on the IL. Fraley and Jimmy Candelario, we'll see whether or not they play. It's going to have a big impact on the lineup. But they're going up against Miles Michaelis, who is, not terrible at suppressing runs, but certainly is a hittable pitcher. Going to give up a lot of contact. And with the skill set that those Reds provide on the right day, they're kind of an interesting lineup. Cardinals on the other side going up against Andrew Abbott. They're drawing a 4.08 implied total. Just looks like any other day for the Cards. That's just kind of how they are this season where, there's playable bats, but it's mostly on reputation on a lot of days. Abbott's gettable enough, but he's got a little bit of strikeout upside. Low run total in both sides. Guardians at the Royals really like the spot for offense on both sides of this one. It's Michael Wacha going for the Royals and Ben Lively going for the Guardians. Royals really flashing a lot of upside in the home run model. I really like several of those bats. They got Michael Massey back in that lineup, so there's a really interesting run of lefties to throw at Ben Lively. Lively's had a little bit of an issue with home runs this year. really looks good on the Royals side. And then going back the other way, we just like that Guardians lineup. They're just an effective team, and they're drawing a 4.66 implied total against Waka. 9 runs is the highest on the board. 4.44 on the other side for the Royals. So appealing for bats on both sides. I do think you could get away with, at least considering the pitchers. And for SP2s on DK on that short 4 games, we're going to have to look at them. But definitely it looks more like bats in that game. Last game up, the Tigers drawing a very appealing total at 4.66 runs, 8.5 for the game. They're facing Davis Daniel. He's pitched in the show. He pitched in the show a little bit last year. Made 3 starts last year, 12 1/3 innings. Primarily has pitched in the minors. Made 14 starts in AAA this year. Hasn't really given up a ton of power in the minors, but seems like a relatively targetable pitcher. It's just with the up and down nature of that Detroit lineup, you never know what you're going to get out of those bats. Going back the other way, Jack Flaherty going for the Tigers has the Angels down at just 3.93. Pretty high-end option going up against a pretty weak Angels lineup. So it's an interesting slate. There's a lot of really good pitching talent on it. Take a look at that. All right, let me do this real quick. So it was him, and him. Just to mostly to remind myself, but those guys highlighted in red there are only on the FanDuel main slate. They are now, I didn't have their prices on the board before, that's why I had to do this. The prices that you see here are for that 2-game on the DraftKings side, are for the 2-game DraftKings 620 slate. Why they did that, I don't really know. Why they went 2 games and split it off instead of just starting at 620 like FanDuel is beyond me. But all these guys are available on FanDuel. The guys highlighted in red are not available on the DraftKings 4-game main slate. Just the other guys are. It'll be fun to talk this through as I forget that as I'm talking about it 4 different times. So Wheeler, top of the FanDuel board easily at 10-6 in that matchup against Miami. If you can get to him, it's just highly advisable. He's just that good. It's just that good of a matchup. Projects out at the top of the board. If I gave him a little bit more leash in innings, which he's more than capable of getting, it would be an even higher median projection. So looks terrific. If you're playing that 2-game DraftKings slate, he's easily your top option for $10K. That said, if you're playing that slate, Corbin Burns for a $1,000 discount going up against Texas, it's obviously a much worse matchup, but you're not talking about a lower end pitcher by any means. So that's not a bad consideration there. John Gray against Baltimore on that slate is, a playable SP2 option when you've only got 4 pitchers to work with. I don't know that I would want to go to Trevor Rogers all that often, but the fact that he's only 5,000 is kind of appealing down the bottom of the board. He's got a little bit of projection. He's got a little bit of potential there, but odds are that Philly with a 5+ run total is going to get to him on that slate. So kind of a problematic third option there. Unless you really have some faith or you just really want to roll the dice on that $5,000 price tag. On the full board, Jack Flaherty is your top option on that DK main slate, the 4-gamer. He looks terrific on FanDuel, 10-8, just by comparison to having Zach Wheeler available for 200 less against Miami. It makes sense to just go to Wheeler there. I do think that'll create an ownership gap between the two, though. So if you've got an extra $200, or if you got the option to I could play this medium strength outfielder, or for 200 less, I can play that medium strength outfielder and move from Wheeler up to Flaherty at lower ownership. It's probably worth doing. Flaherty is super high end. It's a very gettable Angels team with plenty of strikeouts, similar matchup, similar talent level. So no issues with doing it. I do believe that Wheeler is justifiably projected for a gap in the median projection there. I think that's correct. But again, if Flaherty goes off at significantly lower ownership for the higher price, I think it's worth a consideration. At 9-8 on DraftKings, he's just your top option. Carlos Burns again on FanDuel in the mix at that top spot as well. Just a tougher matchup against Texas than either of the guys above him. He is at a lower price for it. So if Burns gets a little bit popular, especially, that's where Flaherty might fall into a little bit of a gap. It's just all right, if I'm gonna take a pitcher who's not Wheeler, I could pay all the way down and get to Burns for 500 less instead of going up. So I think more people might be inclined to even do that, which puts Flaherty even in a bigger ownership gap. Just makes him interesting. But Burns is super playable. He has more than enough to beat that Texas team. They've been, mediocre. There's a lot of hitters who have not been exactly themselves. That said, a lot of talent in that Texas lineup and a lot of upside on the right day. Rodon against Toronto, he's got the strikeout stuff, but it hasn't really been as strong this year by a pretty wide margin from where he was over years past, and that is a fairly low strikeout Blue Jays lineup. 9,300, 8,600, you're paying a fair price for him in that spot. I have no issues with going to it. It's just kind of only a medium faith kind of a play, and I feel like it's not the greatest strikeout spot in the world. We can take the yellow off of those guys. That's from yesterday. Andrew Abbott, 88, 8,000 against a very gettable St. Louis team. Just kind of an okay option. He does, again, have strikeout upside. In his last start, he struck out 10 Red Sox in 5 2/3. He gave up two home runs, but it was the only 2 earned runs he gave up, 4 hits. That was his strikeout high for the season, but he's got an 8 strikeout game in here, a 7 strikeout game. He's all right. There's just also a lot of good bats in that St. Louis lineup. Even though they've underperformed, I still do believe in some of those talents, at least to some degree. Jose Barrios against the Yankees, just a troubling spot for, again, a guy who's just slightly above league average. On the right day, he absolutely has the stuff to shut down that Yankees lineup. There are strikeouts available in that Yankees lineup, and he comes at a fair price. Like, if you're playing 150 lineups, you should absolutely carve out some space for Barrios at 8,200 compared to these guys on FanDuel. 7,700, he's just in the mix for some of your SP2 shares on the short 4-gamer on DraftKings. Not a bad option at all compared to these two and him. That's a pretty significant discount for another 300. It's just you're dealing with the Yankees lineup. John Gray, again, on the FanDuel slate, it's more of a stretch, I think, just given that you've got some similarly priced, comparable type options. He does have the talent to beat that Baltimore team, but they are just very, very good. 7,500, 7,000. We'll take a look at him. 7,000 on the 2-game DraftKings slate. We'll take a look at him on the FanDuel slate because that is a significant enough discount. Another 700 down from Jose Barrios for a comparable enough matchup. It's worth considering at least. But it's another just medium faith kind of a play. Lively really doesn't look all that strong, and he's priced at 9,000 on FanDuel for reasons. 8,300 on DraftKings also puts him in just an awkward price fit compared to a lot of better pitchers above him. We'll give it a look, but it seems like a weird one to me. Miles Mikolas, I just prefer the Cincinnati side, even with that low total. Just kind of an innings eater, low strikeout type, contact-oriented pitcher. He is very cheap. He could easily give you 6 clean innings, find a few even bonus strikeouts against that team. And again, they've only just recently, in the last month, scraped their way above league average for run creation against righties. So, there's a little bit of a lane for Miles Mikolas. You like how you can sell that both ways? 77, 75. He's value enough on the slate has a high peak, but it does kind of shorten really quickly, especially given the matchups for these two guys. Like these two guys, medium talent, bad matchups. These guys, lower end talent and a mix of matchups. Actually, not one of those matchups outside of maybe Detroit is all that good. So while I was saying there are quality pitching options, it is more of a case where the board peaks high and then dies off pretty quickly. Davis Daniel, I really struggle to see at 6,300, 5,500. He is very, very cheap. So we'll give him a look at least for that reason. And Detroit is definitely a gettable team. They're very, very up and down. Waka against Cleveland, I just don't love targeting that Cleveland lineup. But short slate, we're going to have to at least consider him for some shares. And at least the price is right. If he was coming in any higher than either of these prices, especially on DraftKings, that's actually a pretty generous price at 7,000. If he was any higher than 8,500, I would not really be a big fan of it on FanDuel. Rodgers at that point, I just don't think you need to consider against Philly. So few lanes for him to succeed and so many comparable prices on the FanDuel slate. At 5,000 again on that short DraftKings slate where there's only 4 pitchers to choose from, the 2-gamer, you're going to have to at least consider him if you're building more than one lineup. Speaking of that first game, let's see if we got the Marlins lineup. We did. Not that it's going to matter much, because they're just facing one of the top pitchers in all of baseball. As we get started here, hit that like button, hit the subscribe. Welcome, Lone Wolf. Congrats again on your takedown last night, buddy. Don't know what the entry was, but it looked like 500 and change bucks. Not bad. Appreciate the shout out on Twitter, as well as telling these guys, if you win something, take a screenshot, send it to me on Twitter at the rotoscouts Twitter handle, at rotoscouts. Help spread the word a little bit. Hop into the Discord, pop it in there, brag. That way people can tell you how much you suck. Have a little fun with it. So this first game up, we've got the Marlins lineup in. They're going up against Zach Wheeler again. Wheeler just top of the board, 42 points on FanDuel for 10-6 on the full slate. On the DraftKings short slate for 10,000, he's easily your best option going up against a Marlins team. Confirmed lineup with a 22% strikeout rate, just a 5.1% walk rate. He's got a 27.2% strikeout rate over 99 strong innings in 16 starts. Gives you a lot of depth. On average, he's eating the most innings in the league most of his starts. I haven't actually checked that, so that's why that came out awkwardly. But typically, Zach Wheeler is going to be among the league leaders in innings pitched by the end of the year if he gets a full 30-plus starts. Last time out, 7 innings. He's gone a full 7 in 3 of his last 4 starts. In say 5 of his last 7 starts, 6 of his last 9. So 7 innings is easily on the board against this Marlins squad. He could cruise through this team. Every now and then he can get dinged, but it's usually by a good team. That said, he did give up 6 runs in 4 innings to this Marlins team at Miami on May 12th. So it's a revenge game for Zach Wheeler. He needs to prove how good he is by beating this pretty inept Marlins lineup. Since then, he's only had 1 bad start. That came 2 starts ago against Baltimore. At Baltimore, gave up 8 earned runs on 9 hits in 4 1/3. Allowed 4 home runs, which is wildly uncharacteristic. Struck out 4, walked 2 in that one. Other than that, he's been pretty terrific. Been giving you 6 or 7 innings. Been giving you quality starts. The Phillies are huge favorites in this game, so he's very likely to get that win bonus for you. Win bonus, quality start bonus, strikeout upside. What more could you ask? Low-end opponent for run scoring. On the other side, it doesn't work quite as well for Trevor Rogers. 4.90 ERA on the season, a 4.40 xFIP. At least the xFIP is a half run better than the ERA. You can give him that much, but a very low strikeout rate at 17.6%. Just 9.4% swinging strikes, 25.4% CSW. Giving up a lot of barrels at 8.6%, giving up a lot of hard hits and exit velo. He is somewhat saved by the 9.8 degree average launch. That could be lower and he'd be even safer. When he makes mistakes, they definitely travel. But he's somewhat saved by being able to keep the ball down just enough that that's at a 2.65. He did have a stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4. He didn't give up a home run in his last start, but he gave up a home run in exactly 1 home run in 4 straight starts before that. Was giving you decent depth, 6 1/3 in his most recent outing, 5 strikeouts, 2 earned runs against the Mariners. 3 strikeouts against Washington, but went 7, 2 earned runs on 6 hits. Struck out 5, but walked 4 against Cleveland, but only gave up a solo home run and 2 hits. Weird start over 5 innings. 3 strikeouts, 3 strikeouts, 4 strikeouts. It's pretty low end, but he's at least stretched out for innings now. So, again, if you want to take it a little bit on faith, if you want to say that, all right, Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper, at least I got lefty-lefty. Not that it really matters for either of those guys. And then you've got a run of just all right-handed hitters and several very good right-handed hitters. It's really not a good spot for Trevor Rogers. But for the 5,000 on DraftKings, if you're playing that 2-gamer, you can absolutely throw that dart just from the value bin. Stick your hand in there and know that everything else in there is just broken glass and jagged edges. And if you happen to seize on the one thing that's, valuable and pull it out, then so be it for the $5,000. It's at least worth that for a hitter price. It's probably not going to work. Phillies are excellent and they've got a 5+ total, but he's very, very cheap. On FanDuel, I just don't think you need to do it at $6,900. If he was cheaper than that, maybe. It is the bottom of the board price-wise, but it's the bottom of the board play-wise too. So I really don't like it on FanDuel. Phillies bats against Trevor Rogers, absolutely. Fire away on that short 2-game slate on DraftKings. You can see very, very high priced for that. 3 guys over 6,000 is very difficult to stack up. So good luck there with the 2-gamer. I'm going to talk a little bit more about FanDuel because this is on the main slate. 38, 35, 4,000, 3,300 for the top 4. That's stackable. It's very pricey. You can't get those 4 guys in Wheeler without going to the bottom of the barrel in terms of your second stack or using, a bunch of cheap one-offs. It's playable. It's very appealing. Schwarber and Harper, tons and tons of power upside, 8.35 and a 7.51. You can see the impact from Rogers' ability to keep the ball down, again, somewhat. Neither of those guys over the magic number, but both guys kind of closing in on it. That does remind me, Kevin CashApp in Discord asked about the home run number. He asked why the home run number is 9. I assume he meant why they like, the magic number. It's 10, actually. Excuse me. As I mentioned in there, the number, the quote-unquote magic number is 10, and the reason why, it's just the scale that it's built on, right? You just choose something, so I zeroed in on, 10 being the point at which guys who have an excellent chance would, crack that number. And I feel like it's just kind of arbitrary. It's kind of just a good way to talk about those guys. You could easily say, as I mentioned in chat, that 8 is just as good and gives you more guys to work with. I just like having that higher cut line for the very, very best options. And it pretty much jibes with, if you look at odds, it works out pretty well most of the time. Sometimes there's some outliers in there based on how my model works. And those are typically, decent bets at least. I know some people have succeeded with them. But, a lot of upside here for Philly. Again, 2 guys, 2 premium lefty power bats up at the top that aren't going to be that diminished by facing Trevor Rogers, a high-contact lefty. Rogers also walks 9.4%. He's got a 1.55 whip. There's a lot of negative in that, and there's a lot of good reason to just fire away with these Phillies bats. Trey Turner back in their lineup, 329, 384, 45 over 187 plate appearances this year. 3 home runs, 10 steals, a 136 WRC plus, hitting the ball 45.7 hard, 45.7% of the time. Jibes with his previous seasons of hard hit rate. A little bit of decline in the barrel rate in the small sample, but love the upside for that to come back. Trey's absolutely worth it. Top shortstop on the FanDuel. Well, top shortstop's difficult to say with Bobby Witt and that good-looking lineup in Kansas City, but easily one of the top options. Alec Bohm, 54.33. Again, the DraftKings prices are that 2-game slate. 3,300 on FanDuel, third and first base eligibility. You can move him around somewhat, but he's kind of blocked with Harper there. You're not going to replace Harper with him that many times. You can use him at util, and you can use him at third base in stacks with Harper. So a little bit of flex. 3,300, not a bad price for a guy slashing 304, 356, 492 this year. Creating runs 37% better than average, 46% hard hits. 9 home runs, 4 steals. Not the biggest home run bat, but a good extra base hits bat, a good creator of runs, a good piece in the lineup for a fair price. Nicky Castellanos, limited in terms of the slash line this year, but 11 home runs on the season. 8.1% barrels is down a little bit from last year, but it's up from 2 years ago. 39.4% hard hits, same thing. So he's sustaining at least a little bit of ability to drive the ball, but just a 159 ISO is kind of a weird fit. There is definitely upside for 4,200, 2,700 for Nicky Castellanos on any given slate. Big presidential debate tonight. if you play that theme of Nick Castellanos does big things on historic days, who knows what's going to happen tonight? So maybe Nicky Castellanos, you can get on board with that theme for a cheap price. Edmundo Sosa, 3,800, 2,600, 275, 340, 486. Having a very nice little season, over 157 plate appearances, 5 home runs, 3 stolen bases, a solid 211 ISO, creating runs 32% better than average. Very easy piece to get to. 3 positions in the infield on FanDuel, both middle infield spots for just 3,800 on the 2-gamer on DraftKings would absolutely be in consideration. If I'm building on DraftKings, he's actually kind of a critical piece in this lineup because you can put him at second base for a fair price. And by the same token, so is Whit Merrifield, because he can at least give you a counting stat upside. But Sosa, Merrifield's 600 cheaper over there, too. Either one of those guys is going to be critical if you're trying to build a full stack of Phillies on that 2-gamer. You're going to need to average down pricing from up here. You're probably still only getting, say 2 of those guys, maybe Bowman, Castellanos together and one of these guys. But having these guys available at least is pretty critical to being able to put together bats from up here. So both of those guys are in consideration. On talent right now and on output for the current year, I greatly prefer Sosa. But Whit Merrifield's definitely been a pretty good fantasy performer in years past. Last year, 11 home runs, 26 stolen bases. A decent slash line, but negative WRC plus. Year before, 11 homers, 16 steals, 250, 298, 375. A lower end slash line, and even further negative WRC plus. So we're just looking for counting stats from Merrifield, but for the additional 600 discount, it's not a bad consideration, pivoting even that second base share to there. But either one of those guys kind of prioritized on the 2-gamer on DK. And then both playable on FanDuel. Triple position eligibility for both of them. And for similar reasons, you're just using them to price down the average. That said, with only 4 slots available, you greatly prefer, top 5 if you can get there. And then Sosa above Merrifield, despite the $300 discount on the FanDuel slate. Christian Pache, Rafael Marchand, both also, obviously very cheap at the bottom. You're just dealing with a little bit lower end talent-wise, I think, with the bat, lower output for counting stats, et cetera, et cetera. Marchand's got a home run on the board. He has a 9.1% barrel rate in what can't be all that many batted ball events over 26 plate appearances. Pache has made 91 plate appearances and really hasn't done anything. Last year, he hit 2 home runs in 95 plate appearances. The year before, 3 home runs in 260 plate appearances. Not much of a hitter. The Marlins pretty low end against Zach Wheeler. You can play him for contrarian reasons. They're super, super cheap. If you aren't playing Wheeler and you wanted to go weird with this one and game stack this, putting those cheap bats on the other side up with the Phillies is at least one way that you could get a lot of those Phillies into your lineup together. I just don't think it's a good spot at all to actually do that with, because they're facing Zach Wheeler, who's tremendous at limiting power, who's a very good strikeout pitcher, who's tremendous at limiting runs. His 2.73 ERA is sparkling. His 3.41 xFIP is something, the truth is somewhere in between probably for Zach Wheeler. Low 3s, but sub 3.5, just flat period, as a stopping point, is just the truth for Zach Wheeler. A sub 1 whip, 12.7% swinging strikes. Just a bad spot to be grabbing Marlins bats, even for contrarian reasons, but they will be under-owned. On that DK slate, the 2-gamer, again, they're going to be, they're super cheap. They'll be the lowest owned spot on that slate, I'm sure. So maybe a little bit more reason to do it over there, just because you're going to have to get weird over there with only 2 games available. But, enjoy that. On FanDuel, less reason to do it, I think. 3,100 for Jazz Chisholm is a pretty decent starting point if you are doing it. 5.38 in the home run model, the only guy even halfway to the magic number against Wheeler. Again, Wheeler, 32.1% hard hits, lower than 86 miles an hour of exit velo this year. Last year, that was 86.9 and 36.2% hard hits. The year before, 34.5% hard hits, sub 86 miles an hour of exit velo. He's spectacular at inducing medium and weak contact and limiting hard hits. But Jazz has 10 home runs, 14 stolen bases, just a 171 ISO, but pretty decent barrels. Needs to improve that hard hit number. Probably could draw some more walks, push the on base a little bit, and get more valuable. But the only positive run creator in that lineup, you're not skipping him, and he's not expensive, 4,300, 3,100. Brian De La Cruz, 3,200, 2,700. Pretty good contact profile for him so far this year. 14 home runs in 338 plate appearances. A 182 ISO. Their best power bat this season. Again, going up against a pitcher who just does not yield much power. Josh Bell, switch hitter, 3,500, 2,500, 8 home runs on the season, 132 ISO, 94 WRC+. Just really just not been all that good this year. Not a lot of compelling reasons to go to Josh Bell other than, the frequency of contact maybe. 17.6% strikeout rate among a team that only has, 20-plus guys on it. So maybe you buy a little bit of cheap contact from Josh Bell, but it's going to be weak contact more likely than not. Jesus Sanchez, excellent contact profile at 12.4% barrels, 52.1% hard hits. It's only turned into 7 home runs and a 137 ISO. This, fine, you could say that you may have lost a couple to happenstance in there over 246 plate appearances, whatever. But this, the 137 ISO is spectacularly low for that kind of contact. He's inconsistent. He's all the way up to now 24.4% strikeouts. We're on our way back to last year's number. That's so funny. So, yeah, just a really limited option again, who doesn't find successful output despite hitting the ball very hard against a pitcher who doesn't allow people to hit the ball very hard. Just seems like a mismatch. So greatly prefer Wheeler on that in all things here. Jake Berger, first and third base eligible on both sides for a cheap price. Does have a 10.9% barrel rate, 43% hard hits. 6 homers on the season, a 121 ISO. Another kind of power mismatch for the contact, but very limited by strikeouts, very limited by whiffs, and just has not found success this year. So why would you think that he's going to start against Zach Wheeler? Otto Lopez, Tim Anderson, Nick Gordon, Nick Fortes at the bottom of the lineup. Gets really thin really fast for the Marlins. Lopez, a 77 WRC plus with 3 homers and 6 steals over 159. Tim Anderson just lost 220, 244, 234, a 35 WRC plus, no homers, 4 steals. It's been just sad for Tim Anderson this year. Nick Gordon, probably the best option down there. 7 home runs on the season, a 157 ISO, 25% worse than average for run creation. Pretty limited contact. Not good. Nick Fortes at the bottom. You're really not going to the 9-hitter in the Marlins lineup. This is the Miami lineup, dude. Mom is saying Gobert was the best player in the 2013 draft? Or are you talking about last night's draft? It's the tone setter for the 2024 French draft. Yeah, a lot of French guys drafted last night. If you're talking about the 2013 draft, the Anthony Bennett draft, that was the Giannis draft. Where'd Gobert go in that? Was he in? Gobert went 27, but Giannis went 15. I mean, that's the best pick in that draft by a pretty wide margin. It was Anthony Bennett, Oladipo, Otto Porter, Cody Zeller, Alex Len, Nerlens Noel 6, Ben McLemore 7, KCP 8, Trey Burke 9, CJ McCollum the first good player 10, or the first starish player. Michael Carter Williams 11, Steven Adams was 12. Adams was a very good player. Kelly O, pretty good, went 13. Shabazz Muhammad, I don't even remember, went 14. And then Giannis 15. This is such a bad draft. Knicks took Timmy Hardaway, 24. Reggie Bullock, capable player, 25. Gobert at 27 is a phenomenal pick. I'm not saying he's not. But I don't think there's any argument that Giannis is the better player. Best player to draft, not in hindsight. But, I mean, they took him at 15. Like, if anybody had any idea that Giannis would be anything like he became, he would have just gone 1-1. They took him 15. They took him as a project. So that does make it a good pick. Like, they saw the potential, and he delivered on the highest possible end version of that potential. But you can't say that they didn't make a very, very good pick there at 15. Is Gobert at 27 an equally good pick? maybe. I mean, it is, a solid chunk of picks later. And he is, again, an excellent, excellent player. But there's a lot of value in drafting Giannis at 15. But either way, crap draft. And last night's, I think, might go down, right next to it. Just seems like, anyway. Who knows, though? Maybe Sarr's like a high-end player, that other French guy. Some of those shooters. Anyway, let's get off the 2013 NBA draft and keep talking about this slate that starts at 6:20. So this one was pretty clearly Zach Wheeler top of the board, Phillies bats strong second. Really nothing from the Marlins side outside of if you're playing that 2-gamer on DK, you can roll some Trevor Rogers dice. And then the Marlins bats are just cheap and going to be low owned, but pretty bad team, pretty bad spot. Rangers bats are... Do we get them? What do you got, underdog? Spencer Turnbull to the IL. He'll be the most popular drop in season long this week after being the most popular ad recently. So no Rangers bats yet, but we've got Johnny Gray going up against the Orioles. O's bats always look pretty decent at worst. You've got Gunnar, pretty difficult to suppress below the magic number these days, 12.53 in the home run model at the top of the board. Pricey but worthwhile on a day that does have a lot of good shortstop options. All right, for FanDuel especially, we've got Gunnar and Corey Seager in this game. We've got Trey Turner in the Phillies game. Later, you get Volpe, Bo Bichette. You can go back and forth with those guys if you want. You get Ellie in the Reds game. Mason Wynn is Mason Wynn. That's fine. Nobody really from the Guardians. And then you get Bobby Witt from the Royals. Most of the best shortstops are on this slate, and then really nobody from the last game. So several very, very high-end shortstops available on that the full FanDuel slate. A lot shorter on DraftKings if you're playing the 4-game main slate because you don't get these two guys. But Gunner's spectacular. He's showing a ton of power against John Gray. Stretch of guys in the 7s right there. All believable power upside. No Anthony Santander tonight. Then we got Heston Kjerstad back in the lineup, back with the big club and hitting 5th. Still a very strong, very interesting looking Orioles lineup and some very capable multi-category guys down toward the bottom of the lineup. So much more appealing to me to stack Orioles here against John Gray. But I do think he's playable. He's pitching very well this season. You can see, Stuff Plus never going to really love his arsenal. But he's effective with it and always has been pretty effective with it. A 3.03 ERA with a 3.67 xFIP underneath it is not bad at all. 22.7% strikeouts this year, just 6.4% walks. Last year, he was at 21.6% strikeouts and 8.2% walks over 157 and a third and 29 starts. He's given you 71 and a third in 13 starts this year. So we're, again, dealing with not the best depth in the world. There's a handful of starts in there where only 3 innings. One of them was a good start. He came out after 3. Another one was he gave up 9 runs and came out after 3. Does have a stretch of 7 and 8 inning games with 6 inning games around them in the middle of the season. So more than capable of getting there on the right day. It's just a lot of shorter starts for John Gray as well, just mixed throughout. But he's always been good at inducing swinging strikes, 12+% each of the last 2 seasons, 11.6 in 2022. That was a very strong season for him. Had a 25.7% strikeout rate that year. Hasn't been above a low 4s ERA or xFIP over the past couple of seasons. So a very capable righty. There's no reason not to think that John Gray could succeed for the money here at 7,000 on DK on the short slate, and then 7,500 on FanDuel even. You're limited in your shots at that quality start. That's probably going to be the difference between John Gray having a sneakily successful day and just he was all right. He got me around that median projection that Terry had for the 75, and I min-cashed. It's going to be that kind of a difference, probably swinging around the quality start, and then whether or not he finds an additional strikeout and a half. There are gettable strikeout guys in this lineup, 22.4% for the confirmed Orioles lineup, 23.8% for these same hitters last year. Believable enough upside for John Gray as a cheap tournament play. Don't go anywhere near him for like a cash lineup, I wouldn't think. Pretty limited. Do you like him better than... I guess you got to like him better than Trevor Rogers in the 2-gamer. Luckily, we have more options to work with on the full slate and on the FanDuel slate. Corbin Burns on the other side, 9,000 on the short DK slate, 10-1 on FanDuel. 23.9% strikeout rate this year, down significantly from the last couple seasons, 25.5% last year, and then 30.5% the year before that. Obviously was much stronger back then, but has never been bad in terms of runs, in terms of limiting contact. He's still a spectacular pitcher. He still induces a 12+% swinging strike rate, high 29% CSW. Both of those are down from the 2 years ago guy, but he's still very, very good. 99 2/3 in 16 outings this year. Last time out went 7, struck out 5, gave up 4 earned runs in the seven innings. That was against Houston. 2 home runs allowed. That was a limiting factor there. Against Philly, the start before that went 6, 2 earned runs on 7 hits, but struck out 7, walked 2. A string of 3 consecutive 7-inning starts. Has gone 6 innings or more in, what's this, like 11? 1, 2, 9, 10, 11. 6 innings or more in 11 straight starts. And the one where he slipped up most recently against Houston at Houston and gave up the 2 home runs and the 4 earned runs is the only start in that mix that wasn't a quality start. Strikeout peak of 11 through there. By and large, we're looking at like 6, somewhere around there, but does have the extreme upside days. Going up against a fairly low strikeout Rangers lineup, I like him to come in somewhere in that 6 territory. But that's capable of giving you a very strong start. If he's going 7 innings, there's a little bit of additional upside. He's got the upside to win this game. So, like the Corbin Burns option for a bit of a discount to some of the other guys. He is just dealing with a tougher opponent than either of the guys who are projected above him. Again, the Angels and the Marlins are much lower end opponents than the Rangers. That said, the Rangers only have 3 guys in the lineup in this projected form that are producing runs at an above average clip. One of the guys below average is Marcus Semien. I think we can forgive him 1 point of run creation there and put him back at the league average. But he is definitely scuffling this year. No hiding it at this point. 244, 307, 401, a 157 ISO. He does have 11 home runs. The barrels, the hard hits look exactly as mediocre as they always do. 6.5%, 35.1%. Those are dead on where they're supposed to be over the past couple of seasons. 13.8% strikeouts, 8.2% walks. It's down slightly. Less than a full point there. Just over a full point there. It's not a lot of explanation for any of the struggles in that. .257 BABIP hurts. So just lost some of those medium contact hits that used to go for doubles have now fallen into the gloves a little bit more this year. It's where some of the ISO went. It's where some of the quality went. But still a very strong option, especially with his price coming down. $4,800 on DraftKings is very cheap on that slate. And then $3,500 on FanDuel is totally fair for this version of Marcus Semien. I'm happy to pay that for the power upside. 6.21 in the home run model. Even against Corbin Burns, who, again, doesn't give up a lot of power. You can see the upside of Semien as an individual kind of coming through there. Same thing with Seager at 7.78 and Adolis Garcia at 6.99. Garcia also below average by 11 points now for run creation. It's becoming very concerning for Adolis Garcia's upside. Over 315 plate appearances. We're now looking at 218, 279, 405. Still has a 187 ISO, still hits the ball very, very hard, 13.2% barrels. That's down 3 points from last year. 45.4% hard hits is down 4 points from the year before, from last year. So we've lost a lot of the premium contact. The ISO is dipped from above 200. So there's a lot of concern, even with some power still showing. Striking out at a 26.7% clip, that's actually a point better than last year. walking a lot less. That's where some of the on base and the run creation went. But it's been a really limited year for Adolis Garcia. Which sucks because I traded for him in the offseason for the Dynasty team this year. Had a great start. He was looking really good. But it has really cratered over the last little bit. Josh Smith for 41.32, having a light week. Another guy that's on the... I picked him up for this week for the Dynasty team. And had a couple of hits, but I think we went 0 for 4 yesterday. It's been a little bit of a dip, but 294, 389, 462. Still having a very effective season. Has found a home hitting third for this team most days. Shortstop and third base eligible for a fair price on both sites. A 144 WRC plus still leads the team. He's been tremendous this year. Very good on base option. Very, very good correlated scorer. Limited upside is an individual outside of a few random home runs. He's got 7 home runs, but just a 168 ISO. Pretty limited premium contact profile, but a very playable part that you could just bolt on alongside the underpriced stars that surround him. Nathaniel Lowe also fits that mold. Underpriced quality player that you can bolt in for a very, very cheap price alongside all those stars. 3,429 across sites, slashing 256, 347, 350, 1% better than average for run creation, more of a correlated scoring piece so far this year, but does have the ability to hit the ball hard, does have the ability to hit home runs, and is pretty cheap at this point while underperforming a little bit in terms of the triple slash and the actual output. So I still like getting to Nathaniel Lowe. Wyatt Langford up to 3 home runs and 7 steals, but has still been kind of limited. Was coming on a little bit. He is up to 250, 311, 361. A lot of room still to grow, but a very high-end kid up to a 40.2% hard hit rate, just 19.7% strikeouts. There are things to like in here. There are things to latch on to for just 3,700, 3,000. Jonah Heim for 33.28, very playable catcher on DraftKings if you're just hunting for a little bit of random upside from a guy who is cheap and will definitely be low owned in this matchup against Corbin Burns on that short slate. Again, you got to get weird on that 2-gamer. So a guy like that, kind of in consideration at the catcher spot, you just plug him in, you hope for the random day against Corbin Burns at 2% ownership, or maybe a little higher than that on a 2-gamer where you have to play catchers, but you get me. Travis Jankowski, Leo Taveras at the bottom of the lineup. Taveras giving you a little bit more than Jankowski so far this year. Either one capable of a home run or a stolen base kind of a day and some random output for a cheap price, but not a good matchup. Terrible spots in the lineup, and both have been pretty low end overall this year. On the O's side, the more appealing of these teams, I mentioned Gunnar Henderson from the top, and then I said 3 guys right after him, 7+ in the home run model, but that's Adley Rutschman, Ryan O'Hearn, Ryan Mountcastle. The 2 Ryans are both underpriced, in my opinion, on both sites, especially for that short DraftKings 2-gamer. 4,000, 4,400 for those 2 bats is really interesting, especially when you can put it with Easton Kierstad for 2,400, a very high-end left-handed rookie bat. That's compelling getting those 3 guys, and it helps you pay for the top 2 guys in the lineup. You can go 1 through 5 on the Orioles on that slate for 45 apiece. Kind of interesting. Probably going to be pretty popular against John Gray. Adley for just 55 where you have to play catchers, 35 where you don't, 14 home runs on the season, just a 173 ISO, but a lot of power from the catcher spot, and just a tremendous hitter, tremendous on-base skills, 350 on base, 297 average with a 134 WRC plus. It's been absolutely terrific. Happy to have him on FanDuel despite not needing catchers there. You do have a mix of guys with first base eligibility, but you can spread it around given the outfield eligibility that Ryan O'Hearn has on both sides. O'Hearn, 42.7% hard hits, just 10.2% strikeouts. A lot of really well-struck balls. 284, 340, 470 with a 186 ISO. His creator runs 30% better than average. He's hit 10 home runs. He's continued his very, very strong play from last year. Continues to be underpriced and hits third most of the time. Solid lefty bat to throw at John Gray. Mountcastle's hit 11 home runs, has a 192 ISO. Creating runs 26% better than average, making fantastic contact this year. Numbers are looking really good for Mountcastle. Again, Kierstad, just very cheap, 2,400. He hasn't done anything in his 25 plate appearances. Brought him up, sent him back down. Now he's back. Did he have... Yeah, last year a cup of coffee for 33 plate appearances. Last year hit 2 home runs, had a 233 ISO in that little stretch. Just hasn't really had a strong sample, but a high-end kid In AAA this year, he is slashing. Show me the minors. AAA this year, we're at 300, 397, 601, creating runs 50% better than average with a 300 ISO, 16 home runs in 258 plate appearances, 12.4% walks against 26% strikeouts. I could sell that for 2,400. Lefty against John Gray. I like that option a lot. That's one to consider. Jordan, he's going to be popular, by the way. That's no secret. Westberg, second base and third base eligibility, fair price on DraftKings, 3,400 for 3 positions on FanDuel. Love the option to mix and match them around the board and get them where I need them when you're stacking other teams with premium infielders. Like if you're trying to put the Royals and the Orioles together, the ability to move him between those positions makes him really interesting. And then it's just like, all right, do I want Bobby Witt, Michael Massey, Michael Garcia from the Royals on that side? Where does Westberg fit in at a fair price? He's hit 13 home runs. He's stolen 6 bases. He's creating runs 41% better than average with a 230 ISO. He's been absolutely fantastic this year. 10.6% barrels, 48.2% hard hits. Very fairly priced. Colton Cowser for just 27 on FanDuel on the full slate, 3,500 on that short slate on DK. Another bet in this lineup that maybe once you get down to the 7 spot, maybe that goes a little bit underappreciated with only 4 teams to choose from on that short slate. Monster premium contact out of Cowser. Limited in terms of the reliability. Fairly high strikeout kid, but he hit 10 home runs in his 249 plate appearances. Came out of the gate really hot this year. 203 ISO. Creating runs 13% better than average, still over that full stretch. So very high-end bat for a fair price that might slip past after people consider these guys in some of the other high-end spots. And on FanDuel, it's just a very cheap price at 27 with a little bit of home run upside. Cedric Mullins or Mateo. Mateo's, in terms of the slash line, slightly outperforming Mullins in a smaller sample. They've been pretty similar this year where neither one is reliable. Both can provide counting stats. Mullins has 8 home runs, 16 steals. Former 30-30 guy, very, very high end. Just kind of bouncing his way through this season at 214, 257, 376. 21% worse than average for run creation. Mateo's actually 6% above average. 213 ISO, 5 home runs, 12 steals, and 165 plate appearances. We've just seen this before. Right? We saw it at the beginning of last year. We've seen these flashes before from Mateo, and then there's just no consistency, and it dies on the vine, and it burns you fantasy-wise. Fortunately, they haven't priced him up for some good performance, and he's been, in a lot of ways, in the slash line, pretty mediocre. But the counting stats are good. The 213 ISO's got appeal. You can play the upside with 3 positions at 2,800 on the full FanDuel slate, 2 positions for 34 on DK. It is probably, I'm going to say Corbin Burns, then the Orioles bats, but you could flip that either way. Followed by contrarian reasons only, Rangers bats. Contrarian and the fact that you've got discounted stars in that lineup now. But it's a bad spot against Corbin Burns most of the time. And then John Gray. I guess John Gray ranks above the Rangers because he's more playable. Probably not going to work out. Probably going to get dinged. But does have enough talent to beat this team. So Orioles bats, Corbin Burns, or call that a tie, followed by John Gray. And then Rangers bats just as a dart to throw. Coming up on 4 o'clock. Start time 6:20 on FanDuel. Four-game slate. Come on, we still have time for a little b-ball debate. Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not quibbling with the idea that Rudy Gobert at 27 is a phenomenal pick. Yeah, 6 games FanDuel starting at 620. That's why I added those prices on DK so we could talk about that as the 2-gamer. And then this next game up, this first Yankees and Blue Jays, this one's on the full slate. So welcome to the show, DraftKings. 41 of you guys out there, check out our pals over at acemind.io. They're doing a great job with their sim product, with their optimizer. A lot of stuff in the works over there. They've got product for football, which is coming up before you know it. I know there's a ton of people doing best ball drafts and talking best ball. I'll have to see if we can maybe get some best ball going this year on the site. No promises because we're already late into that season, but maybe we'll do some season-long rankings, something like that somewhere along the way. But DFS coming fast and furious already. Those guys got a great optimizer for it. They've got great sim tools for that, for basketball, for baseball, which is ongoing. A lot of the other major DFS sports, and always more to come. ESPN asks, will Bronny James get drafted in round 2? Yes. I don't think that's a conversation. Of course he's going to go. Where is Bronny James going to go is an interesting question. I love the idea of a team jumping in. Like I was arguing for the Celtics to do it with the last pick of the first round last night. I know that's a Bill Simmons talking point as well. My buddy Lou mentioned that. But I thought that would have just been fun. Just given that it's the Celtics and the Lakers, right, that they could do that and jab the Lakers a little bit. Would have been fun. And who gives a shit about that pick, right? But somebody's going to take him probably early and too early for his talent, which is basically getting drafted at all. But he'll go. Somebody will take that shot, or he'll just go to the Lakers. Yankees and the Blue Jays. Let's get, do we have either lineup? We got the Blue Jays. Let's grab this. Carlos Rodon, Jose Barrios. Again, as I said at the top, either one of these guys easily could succeed. Either one of these guys definitely playable against these teams. Really not a ton of faith in current form Carlos Rodon against a fairly low strikeout and talented but underperforming Blue Jays team. And then really never a lot of faith in Jose Barrios. I know he gets there from time to time, but he's a guy I think we've, over time, over the years, succeeded more avoiding than going to. So I don't love either pitcher, but I do think both are in play. I think if you're building 150 lineups, you should absolutely make room for both of them at price. But it's probably a little bit more about bats in this game for me. Let me get this lineup squared away because there's some changes. IKF is hitting second. Vladdy and then Turner where Springer was, but Springer's hitting there. Danny Jansen not in the lineup. Springer, Schneider, Varsho. Oh wait, Clement is in the lineup. And Kirk. All right. Blue Jays is in. The Rangers just landed. Semyon Seager, Smith, Garcia, Langford, Lowe, Heim, Hill, and Tavares. Who is Hill? Derek Hill? Derek Hill. Derek Hill, 28-year-old, slashing 231, 286, 231 over 14 plate appearances this year in the show. He does have 8 home runs and 7 stolen bases with a 350, 415, 631 in 176 plate appearances in AAA this year. Mix and match part down toward the bottom of the Rangers lineup in that game. There's the Yanks. Perfect timing. Do this. And we'll do that. So as I was saying, check out the guys over at Ace Mind. Promo code rotoscouts all in caps over there. Gets you 20% off your first month. And those guys rock. Pricing's already very low by comparison to some of the industry anyway. Volpe, Soto, Judge, Verdugo, Ben Rice, DJ, Austin Wells, Trent Grisham, Ozzy Cabrera. Congratulations, Labs. You got it exactly right. Ricky Lee asks, what is this Yankees lineup? It is the current form of this Yankees team. Rizzo on the IL, Stanton on the IL, Glaber taking a break. Glaber's on the bench for a couple of days. Scuffling Glaber Torres. Boone decided to give him a few days off, kind of reset him for the season. We'll see what that means going forward for Glaber. Maybe he gets traded before the deadline and they try and move off the contract and bring in another high-end second baseman to play. More likely than not at this point, they'll say goodbye to him in the offseason, but who knows. But yes, there is a limiting impact on the Yankees lineup. That said, with Juan Soto and Aaron Judge in the top two spot, or two of the top three spots, a pretty decent Anthony Volpe in the leadoff spot, an okay Alex Verdugo in the cleanup spot, a young kid who looks like a decent lefty bat in the 5 spot, an interesting catcher hitting 7th, and then DJ LeMahieu, Trent Grisham, and Ozzie Cabrera rounding out the lineup. There's at least 6 somewhat interesting hitters in here. And then there's some cheap prices on the other guys. Overrated 2-3 hitter. Yes, wildly overrated. 115% better than average creating runs for Aaron Judge this year. AAA hitters from 5 through 9. DJ, Trent Grisham, probably too old to qualify for that anymore. But yeah, neither one of those guys has been good. DJ LeMahieu was a spectacular hitter at one point, but right now has just been lost. If he even got back to what he was last year, I'd be all right with using him, but he has just been bad over 85 plate appearances so far this year. I do like Austin Wells. I think he's a major league caliber hitter as a catcher. Reasonable option for a very cheap price. Trent Grisham, not a fan. Ozzie Cabrera, not really a fan. Oh, I missed where Mama said need to add 2 hours for a Terry show. Yeah, sure, it's late. You still got to add time. So, Jose Barrios going up against even this diminished version of the Yankees I don't love, but 7,700 for him is very cheap on a 4-game DraftKings slate. 8,200 for him on the FanDuel slate is also very cheap. Effectively in the middle of the board, you're just dealing with a version of Jose Barrios that has a 17.5% strikeout rate this year. This Yankees team has a 20.1% strikeout rate. Juan Soto is one of those low strikeout guys. Alex Verdugo is another very low strikeout guy. So far, so good for Ben Rice. We'll see where that goes over time, but in the minors, he was pretty good at this. DJ, believably low strikeout, if nothing else. Ozzie Cabrera, also believably fairly low, league average-ish type of strikeout. I just don't see a ton of ceiling for Jose Barrios. I think, like I said before, it's more a matter of, he comes in around the median probably a fair amount of the time. Does he get the win? Does he get the quality start? We're somewhat limited. The quality start is on the board, at least just based on average depth. He does have a number of 7 innings, 6 and change type inning starts here. Strikeout high for the season is just 7. He did that twice, struck out 6 a couple times. Most of these games are in the 4s, 3s, 4s. He's not really walking anybody. 5.9% walk rate. 3.43 ERA is certainly very good, but the xFIP is nearly a full run higher. Stuff plus, well below average. A 4.38% home run rate so far this year, despite just 6.9% barrels. Giving up 41.9% hard hits, 89.8 miles an hour of exit velo. Not going to argue about that 0.2 miles an hour of exit velo that we need to get to the 90 that I'm looking for usually. This is a very high exit velocity. That's a lot of hard hits. It's on a fly ball trajectory. You're going to throw that at these two guys? Outside of the 7 that you get here, the 7 that you get there, the 6 and change that you get out of Verdugo, these two monsters with limited strikeout stuff, limited strike throwing ability, limited ability to induce swinging strikes. He's better for swinging strikes last year. Had a better strikeout rate by a wide margin last year. Was more along these lines the year before. But this is like your high point for Jose Barrios. Mid-3s ERA, but a 4+ xFIP. A slightly above average strikeout rate, a good walk rate. He's not bad. Nobody's saying he's bad. Nobody's saying he's not a solid, just middle-of-the-road type pitcher. But what does the ceiling for him look like for this money? I think he can play the dart. I think he's 7,700. You got to play it a little bit on DraftKings. You can roll with it on FanDuel. He'll probably be under-owned compared to some of the other guys on the board, given the opponent. He's right here. Do people go to Jose Barrios for 82 more often than they go to Andrew Abbott for 88 against St. Louis on that slate? Same thing on DraftKings for 8,000 versus 7,700. I don't know that they do. I think that probably leaves Barrios a little under-owned by comparison there. This one, you'll probably see more people on the KC bats, I think, than on Ben Lively. Michaelis is probably a comparison point for value on both sites. I could see more people probably going to Michaelis given that really low run total for Cincinnati, their reputation for not being that good for offense against righties. So I think Berrios slips through on that. Low price, under-owned, capable middle-of-the-road pitcher. Just even if we're only talking about those two guys and then like call these guys a half a guy a piece and call it a 3-man lineup that we're worried about. And we'll throw Ben Rice in there for another like 0.2. A 3.2 man lineup that we're worried about. It would still be a ridiculously elite 3.2 men that Jose Berrios has to get through. So it's not an unchallenging opponent. Going the other way, Carlos Rodon against a fairly low strikeout Blue Jays team. Has a lot of the same issues. 22.5% strikeouts for him. It's 5 points higher than Jose Berrios on the other side. It's right in line with what he was last year in a brutal season. He's been a lot better overall this season, but it's way down from the guy that they signed 2 years ago. 33.4% in 2022. We're down at 22.5 now. That is rough. It's only 2-ish points, not even, of swinging strikes. He's lost a lot of CSW, lost a lot of strike throwing ability, despite walking fewer guys. Is he dancing around the edges and then giving up contact and getting outs more often than not? Seems to be the case. Stuff Plus obviously still loves the arsenal. I feel like it's all still in there. Maybe it's a matter of aggression on the mound. Maybe it's a matter of not fully trusting his ability to stay healthy. Who knows what the issue is? But a lot of the numbers are down. There are good games along the way. He had a 7 strikeout game 2 games ago, but he gave up 5 earned runs in that game. He gave up 7 earned runs in his last game. Those came against Atlanta and Boston. Somewhat forgivable downside there, but gave up 3 home runs in that Atlanta game. 11 hits over 3 2/3. Struck out 3, walked 2. It was a really rough one. Went 7 innings in Kansas City against KC. Gave up 1 earned on 5 hits, but only struck out 3. Weird performance. 9 strikeout game, 2 earned on 3 hits against Minnesota was a good one. Handful of 5, 6, 7 strikeout games in here. He's completed 6 innings a number of times. We're not all that concerned about the depth of start. 8,600, 9,300. Given the strikeout difference and the potential, I do prefer Carlos Rodon to Jose Berrios in this game. But they're both decidedly average right now. And neither one is facing a good opponent. And Rodon has the opponent that has the lower overall strikeout rate. 17% for this confirmed Blue Jays lineup this year. 17.9% for the same group of hitters last year. So they're decidedly low strikeout even with some of their scuffling. There are 5 hitters in this lineup that are above average for run creation this season, and one of them is not Bo Bichette, who does have, amidst a really, really bad season over here in the actual stats that people care about, does have a 44% hard hit rate that is in line with last year's output, down from 2 years ago. The barrels have been cut in half. That's been where a lot of the problem is. That's why his ISO is only at 103. That's why his home run total is only at 4 after 282 plate appearances. That's why he's slashing 233, 284, 336. He's not striking out. His strikeout rate is down 2.5 points. Walks are up slightly. I do feel like Bo Bichette is one of these guys that is just going to be, the switch is going to flip and he's going to be fine going forward. It's just not going to add up to a great season because he's got nearly half a season of underperformance at this point. But it could be a really strong second half for Bo Bichette. At 4,400, 2,900, I'd rather be there early. I really would. So take my shots with Bo Bichette at the top of the board. And honestly, if we're, again, with all those premium shortstops on the slate, if you just want to shop around for a shortstop in a spectacular spot in the lineup, leading off against a at least gettable pitcher who is underpriced for his talent, Bo Bichette is not a bad candidate for all of those things. IKF, I'm no fan, but he's hitting 281, so he's hitting second for the Blue Jays today, which is weird. 281, 323, 401. Still not a very good on-base percentage, despite putting the ball in play a ton, seeing some success with the batting average. Creating runs, 108 WRC+. You can't argue with the run creation being 8 points above average, but he's a decidedly mediocre DFS contributor. He's just relying on correlated scoring. He fills 4 positions on FanDuel, which keeps him a little bit interesting on that slate for 2,700. The fact that he's 1,000 less, but a positional conflict with Bo Bichette, you're just not going to IKF over Bo Bichette, even with the disparity between these two seasons. I fully acknowledge that if you took the names off of it and showed most people these two seasons with the very similar amount of plate appearances, there is no way that you could argue that Bo Bichette is the better option if you're exclusively looking at current year output. I just don't care. I know who both of these hitters are. Bichette is the better option there. Can you save $1,000 and go to the much worse hitter and hope that you scrape by with 2 base hits and a run scored? Sure. But that's most of the time going to be your ceiling with IKF. Yes, he's hit 6 home runs this year. Fine. 2.4% barrels, 24.8% hard hit rate. I'll take the under for 6 more home runs the rest of the way. Justin Turner hitting cleanup, 35-26. I skipped over Vladdy, the most important hitter in this lineup. 4,500 for Vladimir Guerrero is ridiculous when he's got a 58.9% hard hit rate. The hell are we doing? 3,200 on FanDuel is also getting extremely cheap. 147 ISO. I know the ISO's down. 10 home runs is honestly fine over 346 plate appearances. Were we expecting Vladdy to hit 50 home runs out of nowhere this year? I don't think so. So over half a season, he's got 10. Does that mean he can't get to 30? No. Does it mean he can't get to like 28, which was probably around expectation? He's right in line. I have no issues with Vladimir Guerrero's performance. Out of everybody on the Blue Jays this year, he's only 4,500. He's only 100 more than a completely scuffling Bo Bichette. Look how much better Vladdy's been in everything across the board this year than Bo Bichette's been, and he's only 100 more. It's just dumb. It's borderline insulting. Justin Turner for 35-26. Playable, cheap, veteran guy. We know that he's capable of more than what he's given us here. It's just how much do we really see, future-wise for Justin Turner at this point? He's, 41, 42? So you can easily argue that, all right, that we have crossed the threshold. We crossed the finish line, and he's just playing out the string here, and that's why the numbers are down so much. But the on-base is still good. He is, despite all the downturn here, not striking out, drawing walks, getting on base, creating runs in a positive sense. So as a correlated scoring option for cheap, it's just a bad position at third base. First base, third base on FanDuel, you get a little flax, but still not the best positioning for a guy who's not hitting for any power this year. George Springer has been more problematic than all of them. 301 plate appearances, sub Mendoza, 282 on base, 6 home runs, 8 steals. 29% worse than average for run creation. Maybe he deserves to join Gleyber Torres on the bench tonight and take a break as well. It's been really bad. Really concerned about George Springer's output at this point. You can roll him in there for some low strikeout, buy some contact against Carlos Rodon, but it's gotten really thin. Really tough to buy in on Springer at this point. It renders him lower owned in a lot of senses, and he's very, very cheap for a talented guy who has been a tremendous producer over time. But it's been really bad this year. Really tough to have faith. Davis Schneider for 42, 3,000, 10 home runs. You got 11 home runs on the board for Dalton Varsho. Both those guys are cheap. Both those guys have believable power upside. 6.75 for Schneider, 7.64 in the home run model for Dalton Varsho. 2 of the more believable power bats. Just bad lineup spots. But the only 2 guys in this lineup who are above a 200 ISO. The fact that you can get them both for 42 on DraftKings, 3,000, 2,900 on FanDuel. Second and outfield for Davis Schneider on both sides. Outfield only for Varsho. They're compelling options if you're going to this team. Alejandro Kirk, Ernie Clement at the bottom. Skippable parts. Clement is fine. He's got an okay slash line over 141. 1 point below average for run creation. 3 homers, 3 steals. Kirk is entirely skippable as a catcher. He's just cheap. On the Yanks side against Barrios, again, you're really going to be focused right here. It's pretty straightforward with the Yankees today. It's always straightforward around Soto and Judge. If you can afford them, you just want them in your lineups. 434 and a 433 on base percentage, a 264 and a 404 ISO. Aaron Judge has double what's considered a star caliber ISO. 200 plus, you're probably a star power hitter of some repute. He's got double that. He's 115% better than average for run creation this year. Just absolutely ridiculous. Double what I would consider a really good barrel rate. Approaching double hard hits. Not quite, but a ridiculous hard hit rate. Absolutely worth it at all times for both of these players. 19 home runs for Soto, a 264 ISO for him, just 85% better than average for run creation. Volpe needs to get it in gear for on-base percentage. Averages at 266, that's all right, but the on-base needs to climb a little bit so that these guys are even stronger for run creation and correlation, and we can keep the Yankees' engine going. They turned a little bit of a downturn through June with the injuries and everything. But Volpe's still creating runs 9% better than average. You've got Verdugo. He's cratered a little bit. It's been part of the issue in June. He's only 4,200, 3,000. He's very affordable for a guy who makes as much contact as he does against the low strikeout pitcher who's going to yield a lot of contact. Makes me like Verdugo in this spot. It's a stellar lineup position hitting cleanup behind these guys who are getting on base at those ridiculous clips. Gets a lot of opportunities to succeed, so it's a very fair price for what he is. Even with a 247, 306, 399 with a 151 ISO. Has 9 home runs, is decent output for him. But the 101 WRC plus, the reduced on base, the reduced averages, it's starting to grow concerning for Verdugo. Ben Rice has been putting bat on ball pretty effectively over his 27 plate appearances. Kid looks like a hitter. 261, 333, 261 in a very, very small sample. No power output yet. Has driven a couple foul balls pretty effectively. Got to get the timing down, but seems like a player who might stick, at least for a part-time role in the show. LeMahieu, 34-24 is just really scuffling again. Just been totally limited as a hitter this year. 178, 274, 178. Over 85 plate appearances now. Does have the 44.1% hard hits, but that's really it for DJ. Wellesley, as I said, I do like as a catcher bat when I was talking about this side of the game before. 3,000 for him with the 40% hard hits, just 21.3% strikeouts, draws a very good walk rate, just 2,500 on the FanDuel slate. The output's been limited. Over 150 plate appearances, we're looking at just 209, 300, 318, 2 home runs, a 109 ISO. But there are things to like about the way that the kid hits the ball and his patience at the plate. So very playable part in that Yankees lineup, very playable catcher. And that goes for Ben Rice and Austin Wells. Both of those guys are mix and match options at worst here with a little bit of upside for very cheap prices in amongst these Yankees. I like them better than I like DJ, Trent Grisham, or Ozzie Cabrera. And again, bottom 2 hitters are pretty much afterthoughts. Pretty skippable here. Mix and match your way with Ozzie Cabrera, given the 5 position eligibility. Again, 5 positions on FanDuel is kind of ridiculous. So there's value in that for 2,500, but he's a very limited hitter. And Trent Grisham really doesn't give you much. Does have 4 home runs in 82 plate appearances and a 182 ISO, but is very limited otherwise. So you're just gambling for the home run there. Not to be a homer about it, but I think I go Yankees bats somewhat above the Blue Jays. 4.52 implied total for them versus 4.08 kind of justifies that. So Yankees bats. Carlos Rodon, given that projection, that is a good projection. Blue Jays bats against Carlos Rodon, and then and only then Jose Barrios. The pricing on both pitchers is fine. They're both playable. Rodon's got the better strikeout upside, even against the team that's better at limiting strikeouts. Reds and the Cards. Do we have lineups? Noelvi Marte officially active. Back from his 80-game PED suspension. That went pretty quick. We do have the Cards. Not on Labs yet, even though it came out an hour ago. I should make it the actual lineup that's in there. Wynn, Burleson, Contreras, Goldie, Arenado. Excuse me. Donovan, no Gorman. Carlson, Jose Fairman, and Pedro, don't call me Andy Pajes. Doesn't look like we have the Reds yet. which is a shame because it's kind of a key lineup for tonight. Let me make sure that's true. Yeah, I want that one. Lou Bob home run. I want this Reds lineup because not sure if Candelario plays, not sure if Jake Fraley plays. A couple of key bats there. But you do get Marte back in the lineup. Not available as of last check on FanDuel, which is a shame. Let's see if they added him. Surprised by that. We knew he was coming back. Let's see. New and no. And just making sure he's not in a weird position. Yeah, it looks like they don't have him. So that's a shame for FanDuel, but 3,700 for Marte on the DraftKings slate is kind of interesting. Premium prospect for them. In the show last year, over 123 plate appearances, 3 home runs, 6 stolen bases, /316, 366, 456. Created runs 20% better than average in the cup of coffee. 167 plate appearances in AAA last year, 3 home runs, 8 stolen bases, 280, 365, 455. And then in AA, over 222 plate appearances, 8 home runs, 10 steals, 281, 356, 464. Adds up to a pretty tremendous year. So very, very high-end kid for just 3,700 at third base on the DraftKings slate. We'll see where he hits in the confirmed version of the lineup. Probably matters a little bit where what happens with that Candelario up there. But an interesting bat to have at a cheap price in the mix in this lineup. As I mentioned, I feel like this is a low run total. Right? Going up against Miles Mikolas, who has a 4.68 ERA and a 4.02 xFIP just on his own. And again, I know they've been for the full season just at like a 90 WRC plus against righties. But since mid-May, they've been greatly improved. They moved way up the board, top half of the league against righties, just below, I think it was like 98, 99, something like that. And then if you move the start time to June 1st, for the month of June, they've been above average for run creation against righties. So I think there's a little bit of artificial limitation on Cincy today. Mikolas is capable of eating innings, but he's not exactly a high strikeout pitcher, 18.2% strikeouts this year. He doesn't give up a ton of free passes, just 4.6% walks. Gives up enough premium contact that he's gettable for power. You can see nobody above the magic number, but a couple guys, 7.89 is respectable for Ellie. Candelario at 6.8. A couple of guys in the 5s, at least halfway to the magic number. So, I mean, there's some believable power upside. 39.5% hard hits, 88.4 miles an hour of exit velo, medium barrel rate, medium launch angle. None of that is bad, but a 3.26% home run rate. He's below average for stuff plus, induces just a 6.5% swinging strike rate. There are plenty of free swingers in this Reds lineup, especially the lineup pending. I think that Mikolas for 75, 77 across both sites is a playable mid-range option. Medium win equity, probably even up type win equity. What was the... Yeah, he's got about a half a run on his side for the win. He's playable, but I don't know. I'm kind of drawn toward those Reds bats, especially if they're going to be under-owned for that low run total. Depends on who's in the lineup, but I kind of prefer that side. And then Andrew Abbott. And by the way, Mikolas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 straight starts of 6 innings or more. 5 of those were quality starts up until his last one, similar to whoever that was before, I think Zach Wheeler. Faced the Giants, gave up 4 earned over 6 innings, struck out just 3, walked 2. Wasn't a meltdown, but wasn't a quality start. Still got the win that day, though. But more than capable of giving you 6, more than capable of finding his way to the quality start. The strikeout total is definitely in question. And again, just given the frequency of contact that he's likely to allow, I do think there's a little bit of underappreciated upside for some of these Reds bats. Andrew Abbott for 8,800 has a 20% strikeout rate over 84 and 2/3, a 3.40 ERA, but a 4.57 xFIP is kind of revealing about the quality. Just an 8.8% swinging strike rate, 25.1% CSW. He's given up not that much in terms of hard hits or exit velo, not even all that many barrels. He is a extreme fly ball pitcher given that 21.5 degree average launch angle. So a lot of this just seems to amount to some mistakes where fly balls just travel. Right? If you're a fly ball oriented pitcher, that means most of these, when they do get hit hard, tend to get out of the ballpark a little bit. Gave up 2 home runs in his last start to Boston, but struck out 10 in that game, went 5 and 2/3, 2 earned runs on 4 hits. 5 innings of 3-run ball, 4 hits, 3 strikeouts, 3 walks, and gave up a homer at Milwaukee. No quality start, no win in that one. In the Boston game, he got the win at least, but missed the quality start, only going 5 and 2/3. But the 10 strikeouts are nice. 5 innings against the Cubs, just 1 earned run on 5 hits. Struck out 5, but walked 4. Another bumpy one in terms of the walks, but got away with it, but came out early because he pitched inefficiently. Had a run of 4 starts where he went either 6 or 7 innings. One of them was a rough one. Gave up 6 earned runs on 7 hits over 6. That was against this Cards team. 2 home runs allowed, struck out 3, walked 2. The one immediately after that, he gave up 3 earned runs on 7 hits over 6, but got to the quality start, got a win, struck out 6, walked 1, home run allowed against Colorado at Coors Field. Pretty good start at Coors Field. The 2 7-inning starts before that meltdown over 6 against the Cards were pretty good ones. Limited for strikeouts, but just 1 earned run allowed across the 14 innings against the Padres and the Diamondbacks. So you've got some success in there. You've got some failure in there. You've got some ability certainly to give up some home runs, but you've also got some okay strikeout totals there. It's believable that Abbott could keep this Cardinals team down. They've definitely improved. Been a little bit better over the last month and a half, 2 months. Still kind of a bumpy season for a lot of these hitters. But 4 guys fairly high above average in terms of run creation now. 2 dramatically underperforming former superstars in the heart of the lineup. A lot of good righty bats. It's no way is it safe for Andrew Abbott here, but I do think that he's playable in as much as either Carlos Rodon or Jose Barrios on either side of them are playable. All 3 of those guys rate out about the same in my mind for playability. So it just comes down to a matter of approach it from a game theory angle, look at the price, look at the fit, look at the ownership, and make your decisions that way. But all 3 guys belong, if you're building 150 lineups, all 3 guys certainly belong in at least some proportion of your ownership. For 88 on FanDuel, Abbott gets a little bit thinner, I guess, by comparison. That was the spot I was looking at before. Do I go to that? I probably do, honestly. I probably try and find the $600 to just get from the Yankees to the Cards. Damn it, to the Cards as an opponent with a pitcher with fairly similar strikeout upside. If you're rostering Cardinals bats against Andrew Abbott, we'll start there because they are the team with the higher implied total. And we talked a little bit about the Reds already. Mason Wynn from the top of the lineup, 4,200, pretty good bat, 292, 337, 423. Part of the resurgence a little bit for the Cards, a 116 WRC plus, limited in terms of his power output, his individual contributions, but a good correlated scoring option for a cheap price. It's just how many times you want to go to Mason Wynn when there's so many good shortstops available. So it's really only if you're stacking cards or if you want to get cheap and contrarian with your shortstop spot by comparison to everybody rostering Gunnar and Trey and Bobby Witt and so on and so forth. It's a playable piece at worst. Alec Burleson, 39.29. Prices have not caught up to the production. 12 home runs, a 127 WRC plus, slashing 289, 321, 478 over 264. 42.3% hard hits, just 14% strikeouts, and 3.8% walks. Means, say it with me, a lot of well-struck balls in play. That's all we're looking for. If you're going to Cards bats, I love the Burleson option. Even lefty-lefty. Let's see what the lefty numbers are, actually, before I get too deep into that. It's actually a pretty big dip against lefties. How many plate appearances are we looking at? 71 plate appearances. Pretty big dip against lefties. Maybe I'll unwind that part. 206, 229, 353. Ouch. 64 WRC plus versus a 150 the other way. All right, so maybe Burleson a little bit more limited than that, which downgrades the top end of that lineup somewhat. For the career, it is still small sample this year, though. Let's look at the career before we jump to conclusions. It's pretty bad. 67 WRC plus, 224, 255, 337, just a 112 ISO. All right, so that does give a little bit of additional faith to Andrew Abbott up at the top, having him in a, especially for a team that moves hitters around as much as this team does and tends to play the platoon game as much as this team does. It's kind of weird that they have him hitting second, lefty here. Maybe they know something we don't, or maybe they just want the quality that he's provided overall this season in that spot to look good. Either way, Wilson Contreras, the next most playable bat in that lineup, 5,032, has 6 home runs, a 246 ISO is pretty tremendous from the catcher spot, over 140 plate appearances, makes excellent contact, 12% barrels plus over the last 2 seasons, or the last season plus because he's missed some time this year. Creating runs 53% better than average for his season so far. Goldschmidt for 42, 27 across sites is just very cheap for the name on the back of the jersey. He does have 10 home runs, but just a 132 ISO and 93 WRC plus. Nolan Arenado for 3,800, 2,600 is exactly the same. Really, really struggling. Very cheap for a formerly premium plus right-handed bat. He's slashing 254, 310, 364, but just a 111 ISO. 6 points below average for run creation, just 6 home runs, not making good contact at all. He's just low strikeout right now, so really problematic for both of those guys, but they're very, very cheap for the name on the back of the jerseys. Donovan for 37.29. What do his lefty numbers look like? See, yeah, especially with this factored in, Donovan should probably be hitting second today. Again, with the amount of movement that this team typically puts into the lineup on any given day, the fact that they've got Donovan, who current year over 95 plate appearances, is slashing 267, 316, 360 against same-handed pitching. He's 6 points below average for run creation, doesn't hit for power. But if you're not getting that from Burleson anyway, take the somewhat better performer. Over the full career, same thing, 262. He's got a 355 on base against same-handed pitching for his career in 235 plate appearances. This is a mistake. Cardinals made a mistake with this lineup today. Donovan should be hitting 2. Burleson should be hitting 6. Either way, to our advantage, we know that Brendan Donovan has a little bit of upside in that spot for 37.29. He also gains correlation with, if you're looking at Goldie and Arenado, you can get all 3 of those guys pretty cheap as like a weird under-owned. There's no way a lot of people are going to that as a 3-man on DraftKings. You could include Contreras and your favorite other guy in that to make it a 5-man. That's kind of interesting as a little group of, you're grabbing a lot of underperformance, but you're getting it at a very cheap price. Donovan fills 3 positions on FanDuel for just $29. Everybody in this lineup is spectacularly cheap. Again, partially just given the names on the back of the jerseys on that FanDuel slate, but they are very cheap. Dylan Carlson, switch hitter for 24-22, just 185, 260, 217 over his 104 plate appearances. No power output, no run creation so far. Jose Finnerman and Pedro Pajes at the bottom of the lineup. Neither one has been all that good so far this season in small samples. If we look back to last year, Thurman wasn't good in 61 plate appearances. Pretty mediocre output for both of those guys. So if you're going to St. Louis, and again, they're just in the low 4s, but they are the favored team in this game against Andrew Abbott, you're probably looking from I'll give Dylan Carlson a spot and go and say 7 up, but really a lot of the appeal for me is right through here. And then you can bolt Mason Wynn onto it. Like those 4 guys plus Mason Wynn, and you skip Burleson, who again, I think is a mistake in the 2 spot. It's not a bad lineup. Cue the 2 home run day against the lefty for Alec Burleson. In further disagreement with what the shape of this game is looking like on the board here, again, I feel like that's a low total. given some of the quality in this lineup. There's 4 good run creators at the top of the board, including a superstar in Ellie De La Cruz, pretty good power bat in Jeimer Candelario, a pretty good multi-category contributor in Spencer Steer, a not terrible 376 on base percentage out of Jonathan India, who is decidedly mediocre in all things, but does get on base at a pretty good clip. 5 home runs, 8 steals, has been a positive run creator for this team. Just weird that they're so low against a high contact righty. I think the Reds could get a little sneaky tonight, but again, we got to fly in the face of Vegas to make that play, so maybe it's not the best thing to advise people to do. As Steve McBride has always said, they didn't build those casinos by being losers. Not that that's exactly how those lines are set, but you know what I mean. I think if this is the Reds lineup, there is quality up in those top few hitters, of course. We'll see if Candelario plays. We'll also see if Jake Fraley plays. They're both very cheap. Candelario, especially on the DraftKings slate. They, again, I know we hashed through this just recently, but dude's got 14 home runs at 234 ISO now, over 292 plate appearances. Looks a whole hell of a lot like his usual power hitting self, and only costs $4,300 with multi-position at first and third on DK. FanDuel's got it about right at $3,500, both those same positions on their slate. Easily playable, priority bat in this lineup if you're going to them. Ellie is your top option. It is, again, a deep shortstop slate. If I can get Ellie under owned against Miles Mikolas, 61-43, if like the world goes to Bobby Witt or the world goes to Trey on the FanDuel slate or one of the other premium shortstops and leaves Ellie on the board a little bit, I'm happy to take up some opportunities there. 14 home runs, 37 stolen bases, a 212 ISO, a 123 WRC plus against the high contact righty. Seems pretty good to me. India correlates directly with those two hitters for 35 on DraftKings, 31 on FanDuel. Again, just paying for the correlated scoring, the on-base percentage at second base. If you're stacking this team up, you could do a lot worse if he's in the leadoff spot. If India's hitting down lineup, I think his value is diminished. So we'll see where he lands. But if he's hitting leadoff ahead of those hitters, I like him as a bolt-on part there. That said, I do like the fact that I can instead get Spencer Steer from the probable cleanup spot at second base on FanDuel for 33. Not an uninteresting bat there. He's got 9 home runs, 12 steals, a 165 ISO, creating runs 3% better than average. Solid little 41.4% hard hit rate overall. Yeah, Dave, we talked about that. India found life in his bat from the leadoff spot lately, and he's just a good on-base option. We talked about it the day that they ended up moving him up there as a potential option before the lineup came out, and he's a good fit up there. Minnesota smacking Jordan Montgomery. He's just been bad this year, man. Jordan Montgomery's got, I don't know if something's up with that arm. I'm not sure what's going on. Wouldn't shock me if we saw before the end of the season, like, Montgomery hits the IL with forearm tightness, elbow issue, shoulder issue. I'm not saying he is hurt, but he is dramatically underperforming. Continuing the Cards lineup. So again, Spencer Steer on DraftKings as well, despite the lack of second base eligibility. Still a tremendous option for 47. Jake Fraley, if he's in the lineup, a good lefty contact hitter, 277, 328, 348. Not a great power bat, not a great driver in of runs, but capable of getting on base, capable of keeping the lineup churning, being a correlated scoring piece from the heart of the lineup. If he ends up hitting second, if he's in the leadoff spot for some reason, or if he's down further down in the lineup, I think he actually gains a little bit of appeal, given what the skill set is, more as like a wraparound or a table setter. Putting him in the heart of the lineup, he is left-handed, you get that upside, but a little bit more limiting maybe. Tyler Stevenson, we've talked about a bunch of times. Love the premium contact, 9.7% barrels, 46.1% hard hits so far this year. It's over 230 plate appearances, the everyday catcher for these guys. 6 home runs on the season, a 157 ISO. Both of those numbers could be a little bit higher given the premium contact. Both of them do have happenstance just kind of cooked into that. So for a cheap price where you have to play catchers as a one-off, I think he's in play given the frequency of contact that would be available against Mikolas. As a part of a stack, I think he's absolutely one of the priority bats on this team on DraftKings. Just an interesting enough hitter, more often than not. I think he's playable on FanDuel, too. There's no have to play him at first base guy on this slate, or on this team on that slate. So I think he's usable in that spot. Marte, again, we read through the minor league stats. Pretty tremendous couple of years in the minors. Who knows how much of that was performance-enhancing drug aided? That was what he was suspended for, right? Wasn't gambling, right? So, maybe some concerns there, but 3,700 is very cheap for that level of talent if we're believers on the DraftKings slate. Not available on FanDuel. Will Benson, love the skill set. The output is very infrequent, 188, 282, 372, but in 249 plate appearances, does have 8 home runs and 9 stolen bases, and this is basically the guy that he was last year. 11 home runs, 19 steals. Actually did hit 275, 365. What the hell am I talking about? He was just high strikeout. I didn't remember his slash line being that strong. I remember the ISO. I remember the stolen bases, the home runs. I did not remember the 275, 365. That's downright impressive given a 31.3% strikeout rate. I forgot that he was that good of a hitter last year. We've obviously cratered this year to 188, 282 on the front end of that triple slash, but the power output, the stolen bases are still there. The premium contact is still there in a big, big way. It's actually up in both categories this season. The strikeouts are way up, 40.2%. That could explain away some of it. But Benson's a very good option on any given slate for a very, very cheap price, given the monumental upside in counting stats that he provides. Fairchild, a mix and match piece, 3,100, 2,600, 4 home runs, 8 steals. Also limited output from the bottom spot, and less reason to really believe than with Will Benson, I think. But a playable part. So for me, it's I hate doing this at 3.5 runs, but I think the Reds on top. Cards are very cheap against a pretty gettable pitcher. It's difficult. I'll side with Vegas and say it's actually the Cards on top by half a run, but I like the Reds lineup better, especially if they're going to be low owned at cheap prices for DFS purposes against a pitcher that I typically can target a fair amount of the time. Neither pitcher is by any means a priority. Both are limited mid-range playable. So Cards bats slightly ahead of Reds bats in a realistic sense, but in a DFS sense, I actually probably lean a little bit Reds. Enjoy that analysis. You're welcome. I hate being wishy-washy about it, but it's like I equally hate flying in the face of a 3.5 run total and telling you guys that I think that's a good spot. I do, but I also do put a lot of faith in the fact that these guys have that right, or those lines adjust into the pretty correct spots a lot of the time. Guardians, Ben Lively. Royals, Michael Wacha. Pretty gettable pitchers here, and again, a spot that is reflected in Vegas with pretty healthy run totals on both sides. I think this one is much more about the bats. Let's see if we got either lineup. I'm sure we do at this point. Oh, there's the Reds. India, Ellie, Steer. Stevenson cleanup is even more appealing now. No Candelario, though, and no Fraley. So we get Nick Martini hitting 5th. Let me put this in real quick. This is actually worth the look real quick. All right, so it's India, Ellie, Steer up a spot, Stevenson to there, Nick Martini here. Marte hitting 6th. Not bad for the DraftKings slate. Santiago Espinal there. Benson Fairchild. All right. So that Reds lineup that we just talked through did see some changes there. Tyler Stevenson, as I just side mentioned as I was grabbing those lineups, picks up a little bit of value moving from, 6 to 4. Great lineup spot now for the $3,600 catcher on DraftKings who makes all this killer contact. Again, not the most frequent home run hitter, not the most frequent extra base contributor, 3 points below average for run creation, a mediocre slash line, but terrific contact. I like that option now. India, Ellie, Steer, 1, 2, 3 is perfectly fine and basically intact from what we talked about before, but now you get Nick Martini jumping in 3,600, 2,400 across sites, a cheap bat with a little bit of power upside, 4 home runs on the season, just a 135 ISO. Last year, in a small sample, this year it's 139 plate appearances. Last year it was just 79 plate appearances, but he hit 6 home runs. He had a 319 ISO, which is absurd and just based on the small sample, but it did sustain a 10.5% barrel rate, 43.9% hard hits over that stretch, and struck out a little bit less, again, small sample, than he has this year in a slightly larger sample. So I think there's a little bit of appreciable upside. Hasn't been a good performer this year outside of the 4 home runs. Just 206, 254, 341. If I remember correctly, 2 of those came early in the same game as well. So very limited contributor, but a very cheap lefty bat now in the middle of this lineup. Marte just gains a spot on the DraftKings slate. Then Santiago Espinal, kind of an afterthought, does have 4 home runs and 6 steals. Just a mix and match part at best, though. Nobody's idea of a priority. Greatly prefer Benson if you're going to the bottom 3 hitters from that lineup. Let's get back to this one. Got the Guardians. Hopefully it's similar. They're fairly reliable for having a pretty standard lineup. Couple mix and match parts down late. Let's see. And yep, Schneemann hitting second today. Jimenez just dropping in the lineup. So Kwan, Schneemann, Ramirez, Naylor, Fry. Jimenez goes here. Noel guy is not in the lineup. What is it? Gabriel Arias. And Fry was in that spot. Arias, Naylor down here, and then Tyler Freeman. All right, so wasn't actually a predictable lineup. A little bit changed. Some interesting bats in there, though. Fairly high-end team. Pretty low strikeout. We do also have the Royals. Let me get that one in order. A lot of power showing for the Royals today. So we got Garcia, Witt, Vinny, Sal, Massey, Lofton jumping the lineup. MJ moves down a spot. Those 2 guys move down. Lofton into the lineup, and then Isbell rounding things out. All right. So a lot of power showing through the 3 obvious guys, plus from Michael Massey a little bit, and then MJ Melendez, the lefties, a little bit down lineup going up against Ben Lively, who's given up a 3.82% home run rate on 8.1% barrels, 42.2% hard hits, and 90.9 miles an hour of exit velo with a 16.9 degree average launch. All of this is pretty premium home run targeting territory. Significantly below average ratings by Stuff Plus across the full arsenal in his 65 1/3 over 12 starts. 21.4% strikeout rate is serviceable. If you're looking for a dart throw from the mid-range, he's on the board-ish, given some ability to be around a league average strikeout guy. It's just, do I want to pay these prices for Ben Lively against a good Royals team with a very heavy total that I want to go to when these guys are all at similar prices and, as better overall, more proven type pitchers with better stuff, with a lot of, statistical backing that they're better pitchers, not just because we've known them longer? Doesn't seem like a good price fit day for Ben Lively. He's available. That's the best you can say about him. 3.03 ERA, 4.25 xFIP. Just 8.6% swinging strikes, just a 26% CSW. Outside of the runs that he's allowed in the ERA, he really hasn't been good. 21.4% strikeouts, again, is fine. It's league average-ish. 1.16 whip is not bad. 7.6% walks is, again, around league average. Maybe he's a league average type pitcher. That's about the upside, but I don't really want to go to a league average pitcher who's given up power against a pretty good Royals team in a home game at their park. Just doesn't seem all that appealing. I'd much rather grab some Kansas City bats. Michael Wacha going back the other way, giving up a lot less premium contact and power than his opponent, but in a lot of ways, Michael Wacha looks a lot like Ben Lively on the other side. So maybe that's like Ben Lively's career trajectory is, and that would be perfectly fair for what I was just saying about a league average kind of a pitcher, because that's about who Michael Wacha is. 20.2% strikeout, 7% walks, a 4.07 ERA with a 4.10 xFIP, 9-ish points below average by Stuff Plus, but good at limiting hard hits, good at limiting exit velo and power, Had a little bit more strikeout upside last year, better swinging strike rate last year, a better CSW overall. Same thing the year before, was actually dead on the same number, 20.2% strikeouts the year before. What did that come on? 9.5 and 24.7. This year it's 9.8 and 25.5. So maybe we've got like 21% of strikeout stuff available from Michael Wacha. He's just decidedly limited in the grander scheme of the slate. The DK price isn't bad. I do think that puts him more in play on DraftKings, just in the mix for those SP2. That's not him. In the mix for those SP2 shares, even though he's low projected. There's not a lot of daylight between that projection and these projections, and he's cheap. It's just you need him to go like 6-7 clean innings, and you're hoping for a few additional strikeouts against a very low strikeout Guardians team. 18.4%. And it's the same detriment going this way. The Royals are also outside of like MJ. Everybody in this lineup is below 20% and some appreciably below 20%. So just 17.8% strikeouts for them this year. So neither pitcher in a good spot. Both are limited mid-level of the board price-wise dart throw types. But really we're talking about bats in this one. We'll start with the Guardians and their incredible table setter, Stephen Kwan. The average has come down somewhat. He was most likely not going to hit 400 for the season. He's down to 377. That's still spectacular if you care about batting average. I care more about the on base, and that's at 436, which is absolutely tremendous when you're hitting ahead of Andres Jimenez is fine, but more to the point, Jose Ramirez, Josh Naylor, David Fry in the mix as a contributor this year. He's been pretty good for this team, also hitting from the 5 spot. So it's a pretty good collection of hitters to be getting on 43% of the time, nearly 44% of the time ahead of. He's also driven the ball a lot more effectively this year, despite still just being at 2% barrels, 21.8% hard hits. He's made good use of those opportunities of those batted ball events. He's got 7 home runs, a 552 slug, a 175 ISO this year, creating runs 85% better than average. Happy to pay for Stephen Kwan if I'm going to Guardians. It's just I'm probably going to more Royals. That said, this is an appealing game stack game, and I think these two teams fit together in very interesting ways on both sides, really, because there's some multi-position guys. There's a lot of CrossFit between the positions. Like, there's no real conflict with Jose Ramirez, especially when you can get Michael Garcia on DraftKings at second base. That's kind of appealing. You've got a decision point on DraftKings around, do I want Josh Naylor or Vinny Pasquantino, or do I want to play Sal Perez at first base? So a couple of different ways that you could take first base. I really like Vinny on the KC side, but Josh Naylor obviously one of the top options from the Guardians. But then you get Fry in the mix, catcher and outfield eligible. You get Andres Jimenez or Michael Massey. Even Nick Lofton is in that mix. Oh, I've got Andres Jimenez in this lineup twice. That was just from this update that I just ran before. Who did I miss? Oh, I never moved Schneemann over. Schneemann hitting second. Apologies there, gang. Come on. There you go. Adds another multi-position guy into the mix. Third base and outfield eligible for just 31 on DK. Another 4-position guy. You get 2 4-position guys who are both honestly playable on the FanDuel slate for 26 or 2,400. Schneemann over 58 plate appearances, has 2 home runs, has a 240 ISO. His created runs 56% better than average in the small sample. Monster premium contact numbers so far from the left side. 280, 379, 520. It's a very, very good 58 plate appearances. Nothing overly predictive about it. In the minors this season, though, over 223 AAA plate appearances as a 27-year-old, admittedly. He had 10 home runs, a 294, 428, 556 slash line, a 155 WRC plus, and a 261 ISO. Wasn't that good last year as a 26-year-old, or wasn't that good. I missed the enunciation there. Wasn't that good in 2023 in AAA, but was good. 484 plate appearances, 267, 364, 37. 13 home runs, 17 steals. Seems like a very capable bat for a very cheap price, hitting second between Kwan, Ramirez, and Naylor. So really like that option there. Ramirez for 6,000, 4,100, just one of the best DFS contributors in baseball. 21 home runs, 15 steals, a 265 ISO. His created runs 43% better than average. Tremendous option at third base on either side. Naylor for just 49 on DraftKings, 35 on FanDuel. I know that the average is low, but he's got 20 home runs so far this year, DraftKings. 263 ISO, 29% better than average creating runs, all these hard hits and barrels, and seems really good given the 18% strikeout rate. The on-base percentage isn't bad at 322. He's just a little bit low average. Feel like we've underpriced him on DraftKings, so there's a lot of appeal there. You do get Vinny for 300 less across on the other team if you're looking at the game stack. So considerations on both sides at first base. Both are good, and both are cheap. David Fry for 53.29, slashing 307, 419, 521, a 215 ISO, 8 home runs, 4 steals. Creating runs 68% better than average over that stretch. He's been terrific. Jimenez is hitting 6th, not 2nd. 4,500, 33,000 across sites, 5 homers, 14 steals. He's a mix and match type talent, I guess. But the price is right. An okay spot in the lineup. And does have upside days. Does have a little bit of mid-range power that can flash from time to time. Definitely can steal bases. Just needs to get more consistency in his life. Given the low strikeouts, the low walks, the frequency of balls in play, if he just hit the ball a little bit harder, he'd be better. Or if he was just finding success with the weak contact and getting on base a little bit more, he'd be better. Just kind of caught in between those things. Arias for 3,000, 2,400 again. Very playable part. 3 home runs, 5 steals, and 144, but an 86 WRC plus. Last year hit 10 home runs and 345, but a 74 WRC plus. Another guy who's just like mix and match quality. But what I like about him last year, 9.9% barrels, 46.3% hard hits in that sample. There's some appeal there for contact, and he's slipped for the hard hits, but the barrels are only a point and change down. And still, reasonably decent for a cheap price late in the lineup. Bo Naylor's been pretty bad this year, 202, 270, 333, just 4 home runs, 73 WRC plus. Getting harder and harder to believe that there's really a lot here in Bo Naylor. Capable enough catcher, but been pretty limited for DFS output. And then Tyler Freeman, another guy, he's supposed to be a good hitter, really good bat on ball skills, low strikeout, et cetera, et cetera. So far, we've really only gotten the low strikeout and then a little bit of counting stack contribution, 6 home runs and 8 steals. Hasn't hit for average, hasn't really gotten on base, but supposed to be able to do that. Bottom spot in the lineup, maybe not a bad option as a wraparound play, but I like a lot of the top part of the lineup a lot better. Royals bats seem pretty high priority to me. It's a good run total. It's not one of the highest. It's not the highest on the slate, but by comparison, we're not far off of those marks. And then you can probably put them together with the Phillies if you're on FanDuel. That said, if you were doing that, you would have to go expensive shortstop and util with a lot of other bats that you would want to pay for. So I don't know how you do that because you would not necessarily not want to have Trey Turner in that Phillies stack. Be interesting to see how they fit together. Because then you'd also have a conflict with Harper and Vinny. Maybe they're not a great fit together. You could get to a good Royals-Phillies stack, but it wouldn't necessarily be the very best bats from both teams, which isn't always a mandatory thing. If you're going to the Royals, 4,800 at second or third for Michael Garcia is kind of appealing now that he's got second base eligibility. That's nice on DraftKings. That said, there are 2 other second basemen in that lineup on DraftKings, so a little bit of conflict there. He's got 5 home runs and 19 steals, and we won't talk about the fit at the top of the lineup. Bobby Witt's a superstar. 14.8% barrels, 48.9% hard hits, 12 homers, 21 steals, a 226 ISO. His creator runs 45% better than average, 11.95 to lead the team in the home run model, slightly ahead of Sal at 11.72, a little bit more ahead of Vinny, but I love all 3 options there. If you've ever watched this show while the Royals are on the slate, you know that I love Vinny Pasquantino. 46.1% hard hits, striking out just 13.5% of the time. 8 home runs, hit one the other day. He's today's home run pick of the day at 10.06. 178 ISO. Just a league average run creation mark. This improves, that improves. Even that improves, this improves, that improves, that improves. Just on the back of a little bit more time with exactly what he's doing right now. If he continues to do exactly what he's doing right now, all of those numbers will go up. It's just a fact. There's just some bad luck in here. A guy who hits the ball this frequently, that hard, is going to find success. Sal for 51 is a good buy, 31 on FanDuel. He's been a little bit up and down after a hot start, but still a very strong contributor more often than not. A 123 WRC plus, 181 ISO, 12 home runs. I know June was kind of cool for Sal, but maintaining a very good contact profile, super, super high end, 11.72, totally believable in the home run model against, again, a pitcher who's given up a lot of premium contact. Michael Massey for just 4,000, 3,000. He missed a lot of time, so he's kind of a forgotten man right now, especially price-wise. Over 119 plate appearances. He's hit 6 home runs already. He's got a 225 ISO. His creator runs 18% better than average. 288, 299, 514. That on base has to go up, but everything else has been tremendous. Barrels the ball fairly effectively. Good hitter. Like that option a lot at second base on both sides. Lofton is just kind of a mix and match part at best. Over 119 plate appearances. Been pretty mediocre. MJ, I can't get away from MJ. Especially because I'm committed to him for a cheap salary for the next few years on the dynasty team. Right now, looking like a piece of my bench for the future. But can't get away from the premium contact. It was excellent last year. It's been just good this year, but still 10.1% barrels, 42.8% hard hits. There's a reason he's in the lineup a lot of the time. He should be a better lefty bat than he is. He should hit for better power than he does. 8 home runs, just a 179 ISO. There's upside there, but it's increasingly difficult to see, and it's fleeting in terms of being able to actually harness it. Hunter Renfroe, Kyle Isbell at the bottom of the lineup, kind of mix and match parts at best. Renfroe's up to 202, 284, 372, 7 home runs, and we're very happy for him. It is, for me, Royals bats followed closely behind by Guardians bats. I do think it's an interesting spot to look at game stacks. Particularly FanDuel. I mean, just given all these positional flexibilities, there's got to be a good game stack in there on FanDuel. And then either pitcher is lightly playable. I probably lean Waka, just given the power upside that the Royals are showing with both teams being fairly low strikeout. But I really think both pitchers are pretty bottom of the barrel today. Last game up, it's only 5:08, but that means the slate on FanDuel starts in just a little bit over an hour, so we'll get through this one. Dimitri, shouldn't even been moving on up like the Jeffersons theme song. To the east side. Bo Naylor has been swinging a good bat of late, has he? Sometimes I miss the day-to-day upticks, because I really care more about sustainability. But I'll take a look at the game log real quick. 3 for 4 day 2 days ago on the 25th. Pretty good. Double, triple, 3 runs scored. How do you hit a double and a triple and score 3 runs and only drive 1 in? Opportunity. It's amazing how baseball works sometimes. 1 for 4 the day before that with a double. 1 for 3 the day before that with a double. So he does have 4 doubles in his last, 7 games. 1 home run over that stretch. So yeah, it's a pretty decent week for Bo. Oh wait, we can do this now. I forgot we can shift click now. Three, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'll actually take that one out because he didn't. Oh, come on. Why would it do it that way? All right, so over his last 7 games, yeah, Naylor's slashing 375, 400, 750. 28% strikeouts and just 4% walks, but he's got a homer, he's got triple, 4 doubles, 6 runs, 5 ribbies. 375 ISO is very nice. It reflects those extra base hits, obviously. Creating runs 122% better than average over that stretch. It's a very good week. If you stretch that for the month of June, he's at 250, 292, 433. Has been 4% better than average creating runs, but he's striking out 33.8% of the time. He's got 6 doubles, and as we just saw, 4 of them came this week. He's got just the 1 home run, just the 1 triple, 11 runs, but 5 of them came this past week. 6 ribbies. I think all of them came this past week, or 5 of them came this past week. So it's been a really light June, but a productive last week for Bo Naylor. So you could swing that either way, depending on what kind of a sample you want. Do we have either of these lineups? Nope. I don't think so. So one of these pitchers looks very, very high end, and that pitcher is Jack Flaherty. The other guy is Davis Daniel, who 14 starts in AAA so far this season. Has a pitching as a 27-year-old, by the way. Has a 5.33 ERA and a 4.64 xFIP. Those are pretty bad numbers. 24.3% strikeouts is okay, but as a 27-year-old, I feel like you should be striking out about 24%, 24% at worst in AAA. So it puts you decidedly average. 7.4% walks. It's fine, but it's not good. .373 actual FIP is interesting. The xFIP a full run higher, or almost a full run higher than the actual FIP. As I mentioned before, he does have a number of spots in here over mixed sample sizes where he's been pretty decent at limiting home run output. In a homers per 9 sense, he's given up just a .59 home run per 9 over those 14 starts in AAA this year. It was .73 over just 3 outings, 12 and a third last year. Pretty small sample last year. 102 innings in AAA in 2022. He gave up a 1.23 home run per 9, but then was back below 1 over like 90 some odd innings in lower levels of minor league ball in 2021. So hasn't been overly gettable for power. That's the one thing that's kind of working for him here. But there's a lot of good reasons to consider the Tigers, given a 4.66 implied total that is one of the highest on the slate. It ties the Guardians, falls just short of where the Phillies are at the top of the board. If you're on the 4-game DK slate, these are the Guardians and the Tigers are your 2 highest implied totals, followed by the Yankees. So there's a lot of reasons to consider them. I don't know that you necessarily want much Davis Daniel in your life. 5,500 is at least very cheap on the DraftKings slate. What's the game login? I just want to see what the innings have looked like in his AAA. 6 2/3, 6 2/3, 5 1/3, 6 innings. So those last 4 starts are reasonable depth. He had some decent starts for depth earlier in the season. His June hasn't been bad in AAA. He had 1 bumpy start over 5 1/3, gave up 5 earned, and gave up 2 home runs in that game. Did strike out 8. The other 3 starts are all quality starts. 6 innings, 8 strikeouts, 2 earned runs against Arizona's affiliate. 6 2/3 of 1-run ball, 6 hits, 8 strikeouts against Oakland's affiliate. 6 2/3 against Arizona again in a home game. 3 earned runs on 8 hits, struck out 5. But all 3 of the games before that, 8 strikeouts apiece, a couple 7 strikeout games in throughout the game log. It's been all right at AAA. Given the stretched out nature of the pitcher, it's not like one of these when we get one of these 30+% strikeout guys from the minor leagues who's like a high profile prospect. This guy's in no way that. He's over 20. He's 27 years old. But he's been capable enough, and he's been giving you not complete games, but complete starts, full expectations of 5-6 innings in the minors. So on a 4-game slate, when probably not that many people are going to do it against one of the highest implied totals on the board, there is at least a little bit of appeal in maybe considering him at 55 on DraftKings. I feel like it's really, really thin on FanDuel because I don't really have much faith in actually booking that quality start. And there's a lot of good pitching options. He's very cheap on FanDuel as well, but it's a lot more thin over there. For 5 innings for 5,500, find me 4 strikeouts and pitch 5 clean innings, 4 or 5 strikeouts. Maybe it's not like you're going to get a line for the win, so it's only an innings, and you're hoping for cleanliness and a couple of strikeouts against the Tigers team that the projected version of the lineup has a 24.6% strikeout rate this year. So limit the power for me. Find me a couple of few strikeouts and complete 5 innings for my 5,500 on DraftKings. It is a total dart throw. Before a couple hours ago, I knew nothing about this pitcher. So, I mean, it is a just price and angle-based dart throw. But it's at least a good team to do it against. It's not like we've been hot to get to the Tigers' bats this year. Outside of Riley Green, really nobody's been all that good this season. Green, 38% better than average for run creation, a 234 ISO, 15 home runs, easily their best hitter. Very solid 13.7% barrels, 47.3% hard hits. He's been terrific. Matt Vierling has been their second best hitter. 105 WRC plus, 195 ISO, 10 home runs. Kind of unexpected output from Vierling. He's been good. 10.1% barrels, 43.9% hard hits. Just 2,700 outfield and third base on FanDuel. Look at all this multi-position on FanDuel if this is the lineup. Straightforward positioning on DraftKings, but everybody's cheap. Even Green at 52, he could easily be 55, higher. 34 on FanDuel is a little bit higher relatively, but everybody around him is cheap. Easy to build with. But, I mean, 20 plus, a lot of 20 plus, a lot of strikeout targets for Davis Daniel. I don't know. I don't want to sell the Davis Daniel idea too hard because I don't think it's going to work. Mark Connor for 41.26. Easy enough to grab. 343 on base, keeps his WRC plus in the positive light. Just 6 home runs, just 4 steals. 236, 357 on either end of the slash line. Pretty concerning. More just a correlated scoring piece, which makes him just a really weird fit in the cleanup spot. Given how good Matt Vierling's been with the power output and the fact that he's only getting on at a 288, it just makes a lot more sense to take Kana and put him here and take Vierling and put him there. But what do I know? Colt Keith, just 240, 288, 330, a .090 ISO, a 76 WRC plus. Has been better over like the last month if you isolate those numbers. Doesn't really strike out a lot, doesn't walk a ton. Not making the expected level of premium contact. It's not terrible, but it's pretty middle of the road. He's just cheap, 28, 26 for the upside, for the talent. If we're looking at minor league numbers, he is supposed to be a good player. He's a premium kid for them. Just hasn't fully delivered on his promise yet, over 250 plate appearances. But he's a playable part if you're stacking Tigers, certainly, especially if he's hitting second today. Winfield Perez for 4,700, a mix and match piece, 3 homers, 6 steals, an okay slash line, 103 WRC plus. He's playable, but he's not great. Gio Urshela, not really much of a hitter. 253 is fine, but a 292 on base, a .069 ISO, 2 home runs. He's never really been a good hitter. Justin Henry Malloy giving you a 10% barrel rate, but very limited in terms of the hard hits over his 63 plate appearances. Not many batted ball events in there, but also a lot of strikeouts in there. 148, 254, 296 so far. Does have 2 home runs. For the money, if you're stacking Tigers, he's going to be one of the lower-owned guys, especially if he's hitting 7th. So at least a mix and match name for the cheap prices. But it's more of a, if you're stacking Tigers kind of a guy, than it is in any sense a holy shit. NFL ordered to pay $4.7 billion in Sunday ticket antitrust lawsuit. I did not know about this. I guess it's just for, like blocking local broadcasts? Violated antitrust laws in distributing out-of-market Sunday afternoon games on a premium subscription service. Is awarded $4.7 billion in damages. Goddamn. $4.7 billion going to the residential class and $96 million in damages to the commercial class in the class action lawsuit. That is a wild total. NFL can afford it, but damn. Colin Sutherland, keep meaning to read about that. I completely missed it. I honestly did. 8 Game, you can always check out our pals over at acemind.io to answer that question. AceMind's a killer site. They've got a lot of really good tools, very easy to use, less expensive than all the biggies in the industry with all the same capabilities. Generate thousands and thousands of lineups in seconds at the click of a button. Run them against each other for sims, create sim pools. run full optimizers, play the full optimized lineups against those sim pools, get great outputs. Check them out, acemind.io. Promo code rotoscouts, all in caps, gets you 20% off your first month. Colin seems like he missed the window on the NFL Sunday ticket class action. That's all right. It probably amounts to like 85 cents when it's all said and done. Zach McKinstry and Jake Rogers at the bottom of the Tigers lineup are both fairly skippable. McKinstry's cheap, plays multiple positions, 2 home runs, 4 steals, a 62 WRC plus. Jake Rogers does hit the ball fairly hard, barrels it a fair amount of the time, does have 5 home runs and 160 plate appearances. If you're rostering Tigers, especially on DraftKings, you can play a little bit of Jake Rogers. If he's hitting higher in the lineup, he becomes a little bit more appealing. Typically out of the 9th spot, very low average, very inconsistent, more likely than not going to put a 0 in your lineup, but does have a little bit of bent appeal as a catcher power play. Flaherty for 98, 10-8, not to bury the lead in this game, but he's tremendous. 2.92 ERA, a 2.22 xFIP is just spectacular underneath that 2.92 ERA. He's doing that on the back of stuff that doesn't rate out great by Stuff Plus, but he has been tremendous and has always been a good pitcher. This is just the best version of him that we've ever seen. 33.3% strikeouts, 4% walks, over 83 and a third in 14 starts, a sub-1 whip, a 14.2% swinging strike rate, 33.7% CSW. He's pitching like one of the best pitchers in baseball all season long. 4 earned runs is the peak. That came over 5 innings against Tampa Bay all the way back on April 24th. He's given up 3 earned runs. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There was a 6 earned run game the second start of the year on April 7th against Oakland. I missed that one. So the 6 earned run game, a 4 earned run game, both came in April. He's given up 3 earned runs 3 times. Every other game is below that. He has been absolutely tremendous. He's honestly underpriced on DraftKings. Perfectly fair to charge 10-8 for him against this Angels team on FanDuel. 23.6% for the opposing Angels in the projected form of this lineup. Let's see one last time if we got it. Nope. Nolan Shanuel, funny quote from management talking about Shanuel didn't play in day games earlier in the season because he had trouble getting up in the afternoon. So they sat him as a punishment, and now he knows how to wake up in the morning. Thought that was amusing. 35-27 for the kid. He's got 8 home runs, but pretty limited output in everything else. Mediocre way to start off the lineup. He is at least low strikeout, but he doesn't really hit the ball all that hard. So you don't get a lot out of the leadoff spot. Another kind of weirdly miscast leadoff hitter. Luis Rengifo, 4,400, 3,100. He gets on at a 357 clip. He also has 20 stolen bases. He's hitting 308, 357, 419. Makes a hell of a lot more sense to have Rengifo in that leadoff spot than Shanuel, but what do I know? Taylor Ward, 41-31, 14 home runs. Does it sound sometimes when I say what do I know like I'm just like campaigning for a Major League Baseball managing job? Some days I feel like that's what I'm doing here. 16.2% barrels, 44.3% hard hits for Taylor Ward. Not bad for 4,100, 3,100 cross sites, 14 home runs, 202 ISO. One of their more productive bats. Does have a 23.8% strikeout rate. Miguel Sano in the projected lineup. I didn't notice that. 76 plate appearances. He hit 1 home run, a .091 ISO, 92 WRC plus. He was nice to see for a couple of games at the beginning of the year. We'll see what he brings to the table, but very, very high strikeout power hitter who was just basically out of baseball for a couple of years. So, you know, that's kind of a mixed bag there. Willie Calhoun is a skippable part, 2,900, 2,600. He's a contact hitter. Just a weird fit at the 5 spot in a lineup. We'll see where he lands. Maybe Ohapi ends up in the 5 spot, which would make more sense. He's got tremendous power, another good hitting catcher. 10 home runs, a 188 ISO. He's created runs 18% better than average. Slashing 269, 324, 57. 47.4% hard hits is very appealing. Barreled the ball a little bit more last year, but a solid 10.4% this year. Excellent catcher option. Not in the matchup necessarily against Flaherty, but just in like a vacuum among all the catchers on the slate. He's got some very good power. Zach Neto, Mickey Moniak, Joe Adell. Neto's easily the most playable guy. He's up to 10-10. Outside shot at 2020 if he continues this kind of pace. 183 ISO, a 109 WRC plus. He's actually been pretty good. The average is mediocre. The on base is mediocre. If he got on base more, it would help the stolen base upside. But he's barreled the ball a little bit. He's been decent. striking out at a nearly 1 in 4 clip and not really walking that much. Has a lot of room to improve, but he's kind of paying off his draft slot. Mickey Moniak, not so much. Former 1-1 pick. 4 home runs, 4 steals, 194, 250, 312, 58 WRC+. Pretty bad. Joe Adell also really has not been good. Yeah, he's got 12 home runs and 9 steals, all of which came in like the first half of these 236 plate appearances. 207 ISO, most of which came. I don't know if it's actually all. 207 ISO is still good, but 25% worse than average for run creation. Getting on less than a quarter of the time, 183 average. Still hits the ball hard, but it's been pretty problematic finding any kind of consistency out of Joe Adell. Jack Flash. I'm going to get wacky for you. Davis Daniel value on DraftKings 5,500, second best option in this game. Screw the Tigers and their 4.6 total. That's probably actually not true. It's probably actually the Tigers. They're just going to get really popular. I feel like that spot's going to get a little bit popular. So taking a bad lineup, even against this pitcher, with popularity on, yeah, it's probably going to succeed. They're probably going to score like 8 runs and you're going to want them. But yeah, you still have to create that divergence from just the, straightforward general pool of lineups that are going to get built around this squad. Flaherty's easily the top spot in the game. The realistic number 2 is the Tigers, but the one I want is kind of that Davis Daniel sneaky value at 5,500 over there. I don't think I would play it at all over here, outside of maybe a couple of lineup darts. And then the Angels are really low end against Flaherty. It's tough to see them succeeding. They're going to be low owned. They are low cost. It's just an angle into the slate, but you're drawing against, if you do that with Miami or with the Angels, you're drawing against 2 excellent pitchers from the top of the board who, yeah, they're both going to be popular, but they're both going to be popular because they're both very, very likely to succeed. So it gets really thin around those 2 options. There's probably better ways to do that. Rounding things off, we got to get out of here and get the slate updated for that 6:20 start on FanDuel. But again, Zach Wheeler, whether you're playing the 2-game DraftKings slate or the full slate on FanDuel, is your top pitcher of the day. No arguments. Will not tolerate any arguing about that call. Zach Wheeler against the Marlins, easily the top spot of the day. Honestly, don't care how popular he gets in that spot. I think it's just worth playing. 10-6, 10,000. He's very expensive, but he's worth it. 10-8 for Flaherty, 200 more for him. As I talked about at the top of the show, that is an interesting ownership pivot. Like if you're building one lineup and you've already carved out the money to pay for Wheeler, if you can find 200 more by the example I used at the top was going from like a $2,800 outfielder on FanDuel to a $2,600 outfielder to create that $200. I do feel like in a similar matchup, given the higher price, Flaherty will probably be lower owned. So there is at least a little window of an angle there. It's the same thing with Burns. Burns for a little bit less, for $700 less than Flaherty and for $500 less than Wheeler, probably draws more of those not anti-Wheeler, but those I want to get away from Wheeler's popularity and high price. Let me go down to Corbin Burns despite the tough matchup because he's just as good, if not better. And it probably leaves a little bit of an ownership gap on that site around Flaherty. On DraftKings, you just get these 2 guys on a 2-game slate, which is stupid, and then you get Flaherty on the full slate as the top overall option. If you're playing that 2-gamer on DK, like if you could put these 2 guys together, that's probably your best bet, but that's what everybody's going to want to do. And then you're dealing with just the dice roll of John Gray or taking Trevor Rogers, bad Trevor Rogers in a bad spot and hoping he gives you some clean innings for that 5,000. Gets a little challenging there. It's just a bad slate, that 2-gamer. That's why they should have just gone with the full one. Carlos Rodon, Jose Barrios, Andrew Abbott, all 3 of those guys are basically identical, even with the difference in projections. I do agree with the order that the projections have them in. Carlos Rodon first, Andrew Abbott second against that Cardinals team, and then Jose Barrios bringing up the bottom against the Yankees. But all 3 of them, any one of them or 1 out of the 3 can and will succeed. 2 out of the 3 can and will fail. It's that kind of a set of pitchers. I think they're all playable in a full set of lineups. Not a one of them is my favorite option if I'm building just one lineup. If I'm building 5 lineups, probably 2 of them are in one lineup apiece, and then one of them falls by the wayside. But it depends on what I want to do. You do get a range of prices. You will get a range of ownership to work with which has its appeal. Rodon and Barrios probably going to be lower owned than Abbott against St. Louis, if I had to guess. Johnny Gray, just a really tough matchup, but he is a good pitcher. That spot is, even with the Orioles on the other side, getting him at that reduced price, especially by comparison to the three guys I have highlighted above, he's just as good as any one of these guys. Well, at least current form Rodon. Rodon peaked higher, certainly. But he's as good as Abbott and Barrios, if not better. And with current form Rodon, he's as good. It's an equally challenging matchup to the Yankees or the Blue Jays, probably. At least to the Yankees. So if you're considering Barrios, you should probably also be considering John Gray for 700 less on both sites. There's not much of a gap in those projections. Lively against Kansas City. Very difficult to trust for the money. I would so much rather just have any one of these guys, even in those matchups. Kansas City is a bad matchup for Ben Lively. You saw all the power that was showing. I don't see how they arrived at these prices, especially FanDuel. 9,000 is a misprice. Michaelis is playable against Cincinnati. He could even find a few bonus strikeouts along the way. He could suppress their offense. He could eat 7 innings for a very cheap price and give you a good day. So not off the board down here. And Davis Daniel, not really off the board, oddly. It's a gettable Detroit lineup. It really, really is. Even on FanDuel, he does give you that price advantage. So if that buys you a super big bat, I just question the ability to actually book the quality start. That's the concern on FanDuel. 55 on DK, 5 innings, with or without the win bonus. 5 innings, a handful of strikeouts. Keep them off the home run board. I don't like being gaining leverage by taking a bad, low-owned or low-cost bad pitcher against a highly owned lineup. Typically, I like to do that the other way around, taking bats against a highly owned pitcher. But he probably would give you that bit of an angle as well, given that I do think a lot of people are going to flock to Detroit on that slate. Walk against Cleveland is not completely off the board. He's good enough to get there. It's just he looks same at best as a lot of these options, and I think he gets outperformed by a lot of those options most of the time. I greatly prefer bats on both sides of the KC-Cleveland game. Trevor Rogers is really difficult against Philly. They're the top offense of the day. Home run board one last time. Couple of New York Yankees up at the top. Judge and Soto. Followed closely behind by Gunnar Henderson. Well, closely to Soto. Not really to Judge. Gunnar, Jose Ramirez, Bobby Witt, Sal Perez, Josh Naylor, Nolan Gorman, Vinny Pasquantino. You can see 3 guys off the top for KC, followed immediately by Mike Massey just below the magic number. Call it close enough for government work. That's 4 players from Kansas City at or about the magic number for home run upside. That's why I like that Royals lineup so much. And then, as I was saying, they pair pretty well with Cleveland on the other side. You've got Ramirez and Naylor right there. You can't get Naylor on DraftKings with all those guys, and it's difficult to put it all together given the first base and catcher requirement around Sal and Vinny. So you're kind of chewed up game stack-wise, but you've got other options. David Fry not far behind for power upside. Noel's not playing. A little bit more limitations for power, but that leaves out Stephen Kwan, who is low on power but a tremendous player, and some other interesting options in that Cleveland lineup. So it's an interesting spot to consider. Gorman's just a weird power spot from St. Louis. Santander not in the Orioles lineup, and some of the other Orioles in the mid-7s. They have a cluster in the 7s, though. They've got Mountcastle. Not Bryce Harper, they wish. O'Hearn, Adley, Mountcastle, and then Gunnar all the way up there. So another team with 4 appreciably high home run ratings, just not quite as high as KC peaks. A lot of interesting power spots. No Jeimer Candelario for the Reds. That does diminish the appeal of that Reds stack a little bit, as we talked about. We were already kind of flying in the face of Vegas, and not getting Candelario in that lineup, not getting Jake Fraley, definitely did knock it down a peg. But I do still think they're kind of interesting. Mamba says Toronto bats for the win today. That wasn't necessarily an angle that I was fully in on, but it's not unbelievable. Rodon got annihilated his last time out. He's capable of the blow-up spot, surely. They're low strikeout, a lot of bat on balls, as we talked about, a lot of underappreciated or underperforming hitters one dramatically underappreciated hitter when it comes to price and just basically everything I care about. I do think you can mix and match your way to success with that Blue Jays lineup today. I don't know that they'd be top priority for me, but they're playable. 8-game there, I believe there should be at least the I don't know if it's linked, like actually a physical link, but the name for Ace Mind, as you can see right down there, acemind.io. Oh, that doesn't make the tabs bigger. How about that? That's a shame. I was going to zoom in on where it says Ace Mind right here, but Ace, like the Ace of Spades, Mind, like that mushy thing in between your ears, dot, like a period, I, as in I, me, O, as in, oh my God, that's a stupid way to give somebody that name of a website. Check them out. Promo code rotoscouts, all in caps, 20% off your first month. 3 days free trial from those guys usually as well. With that said, guys, I think we've said everything we need to say about a 4-game slate on DraftKings, a 6-game slate on FanDuel over the last 2.5 hours somehow. Let me punch out of here and get this stuff updated before this slate starts. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something, and we'll see you back tomorrow for a Friday slate. Adios.